Chapter 1420. Jin Zhongyuan wasn't a guy who needed to stay with the customers all the time to gain their favor. He knew very well that this would cause disgust among the customers. Therefore, after sending the customer to the hotel room, he left wisely. He would only appear when the customer needed him. This was why Peter Chan was so willing to introduce customers to him, because Peter Chan could always get the goodwill of the VIPs because of Jin Zhongyuan. "This is my phone number, Master Chiu. If you need me, I'll come immediately." He didn't even wait for the response of Boss Luo and Miss Maid, and left politely. Luoqiu opened the curtains and looked outside the hotel. From here, he could see a man-made lake. He smiled. It seems that this hotel has a long history. Miss Maid was packing the luggage at this time. She raised her head and asked, "Master, what do you want to eat for lunch?" Boss Luo said, "Well, let's go to the restaurant and have a taste. I heard that many customers come here for the chef." "Okay." Hotel Alec, Presidential Suite. "Sir, I'm Guthrie, the floor manager here. I'm very happy to serve you." A tall blond man in a tuxedo, suit, and leather shoes, who was about 40 years old, was respectful to Mr. Dillings. He even didn't smile. Dillings looked at the floor manager strangely, frowning and asking, "I remember that the floor manager here is Miss Tiffany?" The floor manager in front of him was slightly surprised at this time, then nodded, "Yes, sir. But Miss Tiffany is on vacation these days, so I'll take over her job temporarily." "Sir, do you need her for something? I can contact her for you." Dillings asked curiously, "Are you Tiffany's?" "I'm her nephew." The floor manager, Guth, smiled. "Oh." D. Lindsay pondered for a moment before shaking his head. "No need. Since she's on vacation, there's no need to disturb her. By the way, did she go home for the past few days?" "Aunt Tiffany is still staying here for the next few days," Gusfer said. "She's enjoying the employee benefits. I'll contact sir." "No, there's really no need, Mr. Gustav." Dyram shook his head quickly. "Thank you for your kindness, but I prefer to have a good rest. You see, I've been on the transport since last night." "My apologies." Gustav nodded. "Then, do I need to wake you up for dinner, Mr. Dillings?" "No need." D. Lindsay waved his hand and smiled. "Actually, I'm quite familiar with this place. I've lived here for a period of time." The housekeeper was a little surprised, but he didn't ask too much. He turned around and left gracefully, closing the door gently. At this moment, Dillings slowly heaved a sigh of relief. He stretched out his hand to loosen the necktie around his neck and unbuttoned his collar. Only then did he move his bloated body and lie down on the snow-white mattress, staring blankly at the ceiling. "So, this is the presidential suite," he muttered to himself. "It doesn't feel special." Apart from the price, staying here for a night was about 1 or 2 months' salary for an ordinary working class. He propped himself up and struggled to get his suitcase. For someone of his size, it seemed that every movement was clumsy and strenuous. He needed to use all his strength. He slowly opened the suitcase that looked quite luxurious. There was another suitcase inside, but it was old and yellowed, and the leather was even worn in some places. D. Lindsay's hands slowly touched the old suitcase, and then he gently opened it. There was a violin inside. D. Lindsay put the violin on his neck, and picked up the bow. He put the bow on the string, but he didn't pull it. D. Lindsay closed his eyes and kept this posture for a long time. After a long time, he slowly exhaled, put the violin and the bow back into the old suitcase, and then put them into the new suitcase. D. Lindsay stood up with difficulty. He touched his big belly that blocked the view of his legs, feeling hungry. Alec Hotel, Squash Room. A woman in her 50s with a good figure was playing the last game with her friend. Soon, the housekeeper of the floor, Gustav, came. He waited for the woman in the squash room to finish the game before calling her out. "In the seats in the rest area outside." "Mr. D. Lindsay?" The woman repeated the name in surprise, and then she carefully thought for a while before shaking her head. "I don't remember him." Giuseppe felt strange. Aunt Tiffany, but I feel that this Mr. de Lindsay seems to know you. Ma. Aunt Tiffany thought again. Maybe he knows me through other customers. Do you need me to arrange a meeting for you? Aunt Tiffany shook her head and looked at her nephew who was going to take over her job. As a housekeeper, we only meet customers when they ask for it. We don't take the initiative to meet them. Giuseppe nodded. Of course he knew this. He just suspected that Aunt Tiffany had some relationship with Mr. de Lindsay, so he was curious. It seemed that there was no direct relationship, so he didn't say anything more and just found a random reason to leave. Aunt Tiffany seemed to be lost in thought as she watched her nephew leave. She subconsciously looked at the large artificial lake outside the lounge. Although he didn't remember ever receiving a customer by the name of Dillings, for some reason, this name felt vaguely familiar. Hey Tiffany, another game? Tiffany waved at her friends who had sent her an invitation and went back into the squash room. It felt good to be able to enjoy life at her age. Every day was good, very good. The menu was not allowed to be changed. The menu was all decided by the head chef of the restaurant. At the same time, several menu combinations were provided. But after the menu was decided, all the food on the table had to be finished. This was the rule of this restaurant. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid entered the restaurant, they were informed by the waiter. Usually, the weirder the rule, the weirder the temper, the more it aroused the curiosity of others. The restaurant could be said to be overcrowded at this time. There were some empty tables in the corner, but obviously the location was not very good, so no one was interested in them. Well, it seems that we are still a bit late, Luo Chiu said with pity, but he still led Mississippi Maid to the table that no one was interested in. At this time, excuse me. Someone called Boss Luo and Miss Maid. The person who appeared in front of Boss Luo was Mr. de Lindsay, whom he had met for the 4th time. He was sitting on a very good seat, an empty table, and he was the only one sitting there. At this time, de Lindsay was struggling to stand up. He finally stood up, with a friendly smile on his face. Excuse me, if you don't mind, why don't you enjoy lunch with me today, as a return gift for giving up your room to me? Please don't refuse. Miss Maid glanced at her master, and found that her master was also looking at her at this time, so she showed a beautiful smile. Boss Lua looked at de Lindsay with a smile, of course. He pulled out a chair and sat down. De Lindsay also sat down slowly, and then called the waiter to add the white wine as an appetizer. Cheers to our acquaintance. De Lindsay now showed his forthright and hospitality on the train. However, he was not elegant, and seemed to be out of tune with everything here. Because his voice was really too loud, it attracted the attention of the people around, and they all looked at him curiously. It seemed to be very impolite to disturb others eating, but this Mr. de Lindsay's voice seemed to be so loud. In fact, he was just talking normally. The waiters quickly began to order dishes for the customers who had gathered together at the last minute. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid were still thinking about what to eat, Mr. de Lindsay had already decided. 1 stewed pork with beans, truffle red wine stewed rice, lime orange lamb fish with sour bean cream sauce, roasted quail with cream egg roll, stewed lamb knee with red orange sauce, and even though this was a customer who didn't seem to care about cholesterol at all, the waiter still hesitated for a moment before asking, "Sir, are you sure you want all of these?" "Yes," de Lindsay said with a smile. "Of course I'm sure. Oh right, there's one last thing. That's to remind your head chef Borg not to dip his finger in the sauce when cooking." "Yes, sir." The waiter was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly lowered his head and agreed. Damn it! How did this customer know about Chef Berg's bad habits? He couldn't help but look at the man and woman next to him who were still considering the menu, very worried that Mr. de Lindsay's words would affect their appetite. But in the end, he found that he worried too much. The man and woman seemed not to have heard Mr. de Lindsay's words, and naturally ordered some dishes. Of course, they were not as exaggerated as Mr. de Lindsay's, but ordinary dishes. When the waiter took the order and left, Boss Luo looked around and suddenly looked at Mr. de Lindsay curiously. Mr. de Lindsay seems to be very familiar with everything here, even the habits of that weird chef. Mr. de Lindsay just smiled casually. In fact, I haven't been here for a long time. I remember that there was a special stage here before. He reached out and pointed to the front. This is the place. It used to be a small stage, and usually there was a piano on it. Later, the restaurant's business became better and better, and the restaurant's customers also increased, so the stage was demolished to make more space for this semi-open private room. Many years ago? About 20 years ago? Mr. de Lindsay thought for a while, and then shook his head. I don't remember clearly, my memory is not very good. Boss Luo smiled. It's enough that you can remember that there was a stage there. Mr. de Lindsay looked at the young man strangely, but he didn't know why he agreed with his words, so he smiled and said, Yes, sometimes I am afraid that I will forget that stage once existed. Now that I think about it, I am really lucky to be able to remember it. So, sometimes, don't complain that the world is unfair to you, because you never know when it will give you care that you don't know. Maybe. Boss Luo nodded, and raised his glass to Mr. de Lindsay. Mr. Dillings was obviously a talkative man, but his style of conversation was obviously not comparable to that of a rich gentleman. On the contrary, what he talked about were trivial matters of daily life. There was a rainstorm somewhere in England. In fact, the meat of lamb's knee was more delicious than the meat of lamb's rib. It was said that in Huaxia in the east, people would make pig's knuckle into a delicacy, which was really incredible. Could chicken's claws really be eaten? Unknowingly, several waiters pushed the dishes to the table. Mr. de Lindsay ordered too many dishes, so he needed a dining car, and several waiters surrounded him to serve him. Every time a dish was opened in front of him, Mr. de Lindsay would show a very satisfied and pleasantly surprised expression. He seemed to have infinite expectations for it. Or it could be said that he had an unimaginable expectation for everything. More accurately, he was full of enthusiasm all the time. However, the chef whose bad habit was exposed didn't appear because of this. It was said that the chef never came out to meet customers. Obviously, he didn't break this rule for Mr. de Lindsay. This bastard, his dishes are still so delicious. Occasionally, Mr. de Lindsay would sigh. Of course, his voice was still as loud as before. He might not be very suitable for the environment in this restaurant, but Boss Luo knew that Mr. de Lindsay at least really liked the dishes cooked by this chef. The taste is not bad. This was Miss Maid's evaluation after tasting the dishes. This is already a very high evaluation, Luoqiu thought in his heart. After dinner, Mr. de Lindsay wanted to invite Boss Luo and Miss Maid to the artificial lake outside, but he was rejected. Mr. de Lindsay was a little disappointed and left after paying the bill. At this time, the restaurant was still very noisy, and the customers were sitting at their seats, talking about something. Some were serious, some were laughing, and some were chatting happily. Only one voice was missing. It was a voice that was only slightly louder than the others, and it was a voice that was free and easy. Mobile phone No advertising, 81 song. Chapter 1421. Mysterious owner? Yes, I heard that the identity of the real owner of this hotel has never been disclosed to the outside world. It is said that even most of the old staff in the hotel have not seen the behind-the-scenes boss. This was what Jin Zhongyuan told Boss Luo and Miss Maid about. After declining Mr. Dilling's invitation to travel with them, Jin Zhongyuan told Boss Luo and Miss Maid about the interesting story of Alexis Hotel. In fact, although they declined Dilling's invitation, the boss and the servant girl still took a stroll to the artificial lake behind the hotel. There was also a hunting area here, but it was charged and they needed to be accompanied by someone. They wandered around the perimeter of the hunting area. Mr. Jean knows a lot. Boss Luo smiled. Most of the time, the first impression of a person started from this. Of course, there was also the first impression, and it was most people's first impression. I know a little bit more. Jin Zhongyuan smiled faintly and looked at Boss Luo. The number of times his eyes fell on Miss Maid could be counted with one's fingers. It was not that he was not amazed and moved by this beauty, but he clearly knew that he could not be rude. Who didn't have some improper thoughts? However, the real life was still waiting for him. Although this young lady could be said to be the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life, to be honest, it was probably not as practical as the reward he would receive as a guide this time. Peter Chan offered a very high reward. Just a simple day of service was almost equivalent to a full month's income in the past. Since you don't know the behind-the-scenes boss, how does this hotel usually operate? Maybe because of Jin Zhongyuan's rules, Miss Maid was occasionally willing to talk to him, or ask some harmless questions. Only then did he dare to look at this beautiful lady. Although he had no bad thoughts, it was always worth looking at such a beautiful person. I heard that there is a lawyer who is in charge of dealing with affairs, and he comes here regularly every month. Jin Zhongyuan said casually, but I don't know such a big shot. But I have a good relationship with several gatekeepers here. Boss Luo smiled. I think no matter who it is, you can have a good relationship with them. Jin Zhongyuan laughed and said, that's overestimating me. At the very least, I don't know the chef in this big hotel. There's also that old-fashioned Miss Tiffany. But I heard that her ability as the housekeeper of this floor is superb. Many hotels outside want to poach her with high salaries, but she still stays here. The boss and Miss Maid had tried the culinary skills of the chef. The chef who didn't show up got a good comment from Miss Maid. Is Miss Tiffany very good? Miss Maid asked casually. Jin Zhongyuan said, I heard that even if Her Majesty the Queen came here for a holiday, she would also appoint Miss Tiffany to serve her personally. So young Master Chiu, it's a pity that you gave the presidential suite to Mr. Dillings. Speaking of the powerful queen, Boss Luo glanced at the servant girl beside him and smiled faintly. Miss Maid thought that the master probably thought of the dictionary. At this time, Jin Zhongyuan suddenly stopped and looked at a certain spot in the lakeside walking area below the small slope. He said in surprise, what's the saying in China? Speak of the devil and he will come. Isn't that Mr. Dillings? It was indeed him. His bloated figure always left a deep impression on people. He said during dinner that he would come here for a walk. So, it wasn't surprising. Since we met, let's go and say hello. Boss Luo smiled. At this time, Mr. Dillings was fishing. He almost crushed the beach chair under him, but now he showed a very happy expression. It seemed that he didn't want to care about the beach chair. There were no trophies in the buckets beside them, and there was no sign of the fish mark floating on the surface of the lake. Mr. Dillings didn't care. Perhaps he was thirsty, so he took out a cold bottle of Coke from the incubator beside him, biting the cap with his teeth and drinking it. He probably heard the footstep. Then he looked back clumsily and found that it was the young couple from before, so he directly raised his hand to greet them. It seemed that he didn't care that they refused his invitation, but now they appeared here again. Actually, Mr. Dillings didn't think too much. He just felt very comfortable when the young couple got along with each other. He knew that he didn't fit in this high-end and traditional restaurant. Others looked at him as if he was a rough lumberjack. But they were different. How could a person who was willing to discuss how to eat chicken feet with him in a high-end celebrity restaurant be a bad person? Have you just started fishing, Mr. Dillings? Boss Luo glanced at the fish bucket, saying casually, It seems that you haven't caught anything yet. No, I've already caught a lot. Mr. Dillings laughed, and then bent down laboriously, trying to take something out of the incubator to serve them. Do you want to drink something? I seem to have bought too much. I don't think I can finish it all alone. In fact, I really wanted to drink it all, but I gave up after thinking about it. Jin Zhongyuan saw that Mr. Dillings was really suffering, or maybe it was because of his personality to please people, so he was very enthusiastic to help him. Mr. Dillings didn't care, and said as if he was talking with an old friend, "My wife told me not to sleep with her when I can't even bend down. She wants to find me a healthier so." It sounded very vulgar, right? At least Jin Zhongyuan thought so, even in front of the beautiful woman beside Master Chiu. It seemed abrupt. "Your wife must love you very much." Boss Luo smiled. Without any hesitation, Mr. Dillings proudly said yes. It was just that his wife would be a little naggy. That was what every man of his age would be like when talking about the woman he had loved for the first half of his life. At this time, Jin Zhongyuan brought some delicious drinks for Boss Luo and Miss Maid. Mr. Dillings suddenly stood up, and began to pack up the things here. It seemed that he was going to leave. Boss Luo looked at the happy drink in his hand, thought for a while, and drank it gently, then asked, "You haven't caught any fish, are you going back now?" He said casually, "Yes, it's late, I have to experience the special spa and the massage bath. I have a program in the evening, so today's schedule is quite tight." He lifted the bucket, then the fishing rod on his shoulder, and finally the insulated box, and staggered back. The small plank on the water made a sad sound because of Mr. Dillings's footstep. Jin Zhongyuan was really worried that Mr. Dillings would suddenly break the plank and accidentally fall into the water. Unexpectedly, what he imagined didn't happen, but Mr. Dillings really fell to the ground. His face suddenly turned pale, and cold sweat poured out, as if he was going to faint at any time. He grabbed the clothes near his heart. Jin Zhongyuan was shocked. He didn't have time to think about other things, and hurriedly ran forward. "Mr. Dillings? Mr. Dillings? Medicine. I forgot to take the medicine. My heart is not good." As soon as Mr. Dillings finished speaking, he closed his eyes and fainted. Later, Jin Zhongyuan contacted the hotel. Mr. Gustav, who was responsible for serving the guests of the presidential suite, immediately sent someone to send Mr. Dillings back to his room. Alec Grand Hotel had its own licensed doctor. As for whether he was as famous as the famous chef or Ms. Dini, it was still unknown. They successfully found the medicine mentioned by Mr. Dillings in his suitcase. This suitcase was opened by Mr. Gustav himself. As a floor manager, or even as an ordinary hotel concierge, it was a big taboo to open a guest's suitcase without authorization. But the situation didn't allow him to worry too much, so after hesitating for a while, Gustav decided to do it himself. As for the fact that there was a worn-out suitcase in this branded suitcase, Mr. Gustav was very confused, but he didn't say anything. But when he was about to close the suitcase, he inadvertently saw a very subtle mark on the side of the old suitcase, and his face suddenly changed slightly. He rolled his eyes, closed the suitcase, and then took out the medicine he found. The hotel doctor said this medicine was for a patient with heart disease, and it was edible. After a simple examination, the doctor confirmed that Mr. Dillings was indeed suffering from a heart disease. As for what kind of disease it was, only Mr. Dillings would know at the moment. "Thank you very much, sir." Mr. Gustav came to Jin Zhongyuan at this time. "You helped me successfully avoid a stain in my career, Mr. Jin." What else could Jin Zhongyuan say? The floor manager was a very senior employee in the hotel. He always wanted to know him, but it was difficult to find a way. At this time, of course, he had to ask him. "Oh no, get to know him well. It seems that there's nothing else." Miss Maid glanced at Mr. Dillings, who had taken the medicine, from a distance, and whispered in her master's ear. Boss Luo nodded, glancing at a brown notebook on the table, and said casually, "But it seems that Mr. Dillings will miss a lot of planned projects." Yi didn't say anything, just casually looking at the decoration in the suite. She smiled. "It should be redecorated not long ago. The decoration style is quite normal. Being average is already a high evaluation," Boss Luo thought to himself. He joked at this time, "It seems that I shouldn't let this suite come out." Miss Maid chuckled. "To be honest, it's not to the extent that you have to stay here. and after a long time there will always be things that will break down. Although the style is not bad, it's not the original taste. The master and servant whispered outside the room, and after a while, Jin Zhongyuan and Mr. Gustav came out. The floor manager expressed his gratitude again, and promised to send some gifts on behalf of Alexa Hotel. As for Jin Zhongyuan, he was very happy to get Mr. Gustav's business card. By the way, I heard that there's a banquet tonight, right? Jin Zhongyuan casually mentioned at this time. Mr. Gustav nodded. Yes, there's a banquet. A mysterious guest called about 10 days ago to make a reservation. This guest wants us to prepare a birthday banquet tonight, and then invite all the guests to attend. Oh my God! I'm actually preparing for this. Mr. Gustav already had a very good reason for interrupting the conversation. Jin Zhongyuan had quite sensibly said that he would definitely attend tonight. We'll also attend. Boss Luo thought for a while and agreed. The birthday banquet of the mysterious guest was held at 7:30 in the evening, and now it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, more than 4 hours left. Finally, the doctor, a nurse and a porter were left to take care of Mr. Dillings, who hadn't woken up yet. The boss and Miss Maid went to the shopping area, intending to buy some clothes to wear at the banquet as a way to pass the time. You saw it clearly? Miss Tiffany was trying on clothes with her friend in a shop. She also planned to attend the banquet tonight, so she was choosing a suitable evening dress. Of course, it was rented. I'm sure I saw it clearly, Aunt Tiffany. Mr. Gustav stood beside Aunt Tiffany with lowered eyebrows. It's indeed that private mark. Aunt Tiffany frowned. I didn't receive any notice from Lawyer Zieg. Mr. Gustav said, maybe there's something that Lawyer Zieg doesn't know. She thought for a while and said, how's Mr. Dillings now? Mr. Gustav said, I heard that he has woken up and is in good spirits. It seems that he will attend the banquet tonight. Oh, is that so? Aunt Tiffany pondered. Her friend walked out of the fitting room at this time, smiling. Dear, what do you think of my clothes? Aunt Tiffany said with a smile, Dear Rant, believe me, you're the most beautiful. I'll attend the banquet tonight, you arrange it. Tiffany said in a low voice, then walked to her friend, discussing the details of the clothes with her. Mr. Gustav left slowly. In the room, Mr. Dillings felt hungry again after waking up. But it seemed that he was fasted by the doctor, so he could only pour himself a cup of fresh milk helplessly. Opening the curtain, the afterglow of the sunset shone in. Mr. Dillings yawned, then groped to the side of the desk, opening a brown notebook on the desk. Each page had the same thing written on it. She sat in a car that was specially sent to pick her up. Arriving by helicopter. Presidential suite. Menu. Oh yes, there was a small tick behind them. Chapter 1422. The staff of some big hotels would have their own lounge, a rather small room. It used to be like this in the past. Even for a high-ranking position like the butler, the living space was not much bigger than the bathroom in the guest room, and it was rather messy. However, although Mr. Gustav's bedroom was small, it was very exquisite, like it belonged to him. After finishing the work at hand, Mr. Gustav quickly returned to his bedroom. After a simple rest, he still had to prepare for the banquet in the evening. He was a meticulous person, and because of this, Aunt Tiffany had been cultivating him as her successor. Starting from the lowest position as a concierge, to the present floor butler, Mr. Gustav had established his own huge network of connections. He found that he unexpectedly liked his current job. Because of the huge network of connections, Mr. Gustav also had a very strong ability to gather information. At this time, he locked the door of his bedroom. After locking the door, Mr. Gustav quickly walked to the only small desk in the bedroom and opened the drawer. He took out a notebook and quickly flipped through it until the last page. On the last page of the notebook was a mark he drew with a pencil and based on his memory. This mark was exactly the same as the one he drew on Mr. Dilling's old leather suitcase, hidden in the suitcase. At least, there was not much difference. After all, The mark here was drawn by Mr. Gustave based on his memory. This was a mark he accidentally saw on a letter. It appeared on a letter collected by the lawyer in charge of the hotel business. As for that letter, it belonged to the real owner behind the scenes of the Alec Hotel. All these years, Mr. Gustave had been sparing no effort to find any clues about the owner behind the hotel. It had become a challenge for him to live. It was said that even Aunt Tiffany had not seen the real owner of the hotel. This made Mr. Gustave very curious from the first day he became a doorman. Perhaps it was just intuition. His intuition made Mr. Gustave feel that the mysterious Mr. Dillings was very likely to have some connection with the owner behind the hotel. This could also explain why Mr. Dillings seemed to know Aunt Tiffany, but Aunt Tiffany didn't have any impression of him. Exposing Mr. Dillings' true identity was like a signal that was ignited, and Mr. Gustave suddenly became a little impatient. It seemed to be a ridiculous behavior. There was also a situation like this. In the middle of the night, one suddenly wanted to eat something and drove dozens of kilometers away, just to fulfill this impulse, life. Come on, let me see your true identity. Oh! But now he needed to change his clothes and start to adjust the final decoration of the banquet. Perhaps tonight would be a good opportunity? Mr. Gustave could not help but secretly look forward to it. Miss Maid was trying on the evening dress she had just chosen in the fitting room. It seemed that there was a brand-exclusive store that Miss Maid liked in this hotel. Luochu knew that Yu Yi also had the identity of a fashion designer, but he did not have the slightest research in this area. But now he had memorized the exclusive brand of this store. While waiting, the other two customers were talking. From the content of the conversation, Boss Luo knew that one of the ladies was called Miss Tiffany, the excellent floor manager that Jin Zhongyuan mentioned before. The other one was her close friend, called Xanthi. They were about the same age, probably at the age when the real time was waiting, but it seemed that they would also worry about some trivial things in life. From their conversation, Sui Xiong knew that this close friend, Xanthi, was a rich lady. She was fiddling with her clothes in front of the mirror, lamenting the frown on her face, and complaining about her husband's recent high cholesterol problem. At this time, it seemed that Miss Tiffany's close friend was not an employee of the hotel, but a rich lady who often came here to have fun. Dear, actually I think Chef Berg is really good. You've been divorced for 5 years, it's time for you to start a new life, right? Ms. Xanthi suddenly brought up another topic. Ms. Tiffany, who was also fiddling with her clothes in front of the mirror, smiled casually. We're just good friends, just like you and him are good friends. Lady Xanthi naturally rolled her eyes. Don't tell me, you still haven't forgotten that guy from back then. Perhaps it was something in the past, something that was more distant than 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. But Miss Tiffany didn't show any displeasure on her face. Instead, she laughed. If you say I can't forget him, many people can't forget him, right? After all, he's such a charming guy. I suddenly remembered something. There was a waitress who was holding a customer's drink. She was so engrossed that she bumped into a pillar. Tiffany, I didn't know you could be so annoying. The guy they were talking about was probably a good-looking guy. Boss Luo faintly thought. Perhaps Ms. Xanthi used to work in this big hotel. She even had a love affair here. Perhaps it was a rich businessman or a young man with great potential. But now she was living a life that many people imagined. Ms. Xanthi should have worked here before, and she already knew Miss Tiffany when she worked here. Therefore, they maintained a friendship for many years. Is there still no news about that guy? Ms. Xanthi suddenly asked in a low voice. Miss Tiffany looked at herself in the mirror, and after a moment of silence, she slowly shook her head and didn't speak for a long time. She could only accompany her like this. After a short while, Miss Xanthi found a new dress and fiddled with it. Miss Tiffany suddenly walked to the mirror and carefully looked at the crow's feet at the corner of her eyes, looking at the traces of herself over the years. The door of the fitting room slowly opened. Ms. Maid had already put on the evening dress she had chosen. Under the light, she walked in with a smile. Luocio stood up to welcome her. So beautiful. Women liked such a compliment, and she didn't intend to be an exception. The evening dress was thus decided. Just at this moment. Dear, do you really intend to attend the strange birthday party tonight? I came all the way back here to celebrate your birthday this weekend. Now, what about the private couch I prepared for you? So many young women? Miss Xanthi suddenly said with an exaggerated and unhappy voice. It turned out that today was Miss Tiffany's birthday. Jin Zhongyuan was sitting in the lobby of the Eric Grand Hotel to kill time, feeling bored. Of course, there were many snacks to eat here, and even free tea service. The massage chair in the lounge area could also be used for free. This was really a place for lazy people to spend a day comfortably. Of course, he didn't come here to enjoy himself, but to be able to come here whenever he was called, so he had to stay here. Of course, he also chatted with several bellboys to maintain their relationship, and also showed off the business card he had just received from Mr. Gustav. The bellboys naturally couldn't accompany Jin Zhongyuan all day long. They could only stop quietly, and then happily exchange a few words, usually about leisure topics on the rest day. You are really busy today. Speaking of which, it seems that there are more customers today than usual on the weekend? Jin Zhongyuan looked at the busy lobby check-in desk. A bellboy said, I don't know what happened today, but some customers suddenly came in the afternoon, and they all seemed to be invited. Invited? Jin Zhongyuan was stunned. He remembered that there was a mysterious party in the evening, so he asked curiously, they came to attend the mysterious party in the evening? It seems like. Let's not talk about it anymore. Here comes a gentleman. I can't be here. His good friend's bellboy said quickly. Who is it? Jin Zhongyuan asked curiously. He quickly replied, It's Lawyer Zieg. Jin Zhongyuan was surprised. He knew that this Lawyer Zieg was the guy who was entrusted with complex management by the mysterious behind-the-scenes boss of Alexa Hotel. He was also a rich man. Looking from afar, Lawyer Zieg looked like he was in his 50s, but in fact, he was already in his 70s. His hair was completely white, but because of his dark skin, it might be difficult to judge his actual age. It was said that Lawyer Zieg only came in the last 1 or 2 days of every month. It was only the end of the month now. So why did he come here now? When Lawyer Zieg suddenly came, the management of Alexa Hotel was quickly alarmed. In fact, except for the staff who directly faced the customers, the staff above the management level were basically directly appointed by Lawyer Zieg. Managing the business of Alexa Hotel. If one didn't know, one might really think that Lawyer Zieg was the real boss of this hotel. But he really wasn't. At this time, a black old man surrounded by a group of white people came to a quiet room. Mr. Gustav also came at the first moment. He was now one of the members who was qualified to participate, but he was at the end of the line. Mr. Zieg, why didn't you inform us in advance? That way, we could have prepared to receive you in advance. Relax, I'm not here for official business today. Lawyer Zieg was a person with good self-restraint. At this time, he smiled and said, I'm only invited today as a guest. In addition, I'm here to deal with some personal matters. Invitation. Is it because of the mysterious banquet tonight? Lawyer Zieg played with the cane in his hand and smiled without saying anything. The others couldn't guess Lawyer Zieg's intention, so they could only try to beat around the bush. Lawyer Zieg looked at the time and said, Well, I'm a bit tired after a long ride. I want to take a rest. Let's go to the usual room. Is there a problem? Of course. Your room has always been reserved. Mr. Gustav, I think you'll be very willing to serve Lawyer Zieg, right? It's my pleasure. Mr. Gustav, who was called out, quickly stood up and nodded politely. How long does Lawyer Zieg plan to stay this time? On the way, Mr. Gustav personally carried Lawyer Zieg's luggage and walked in front to lead the way. One night. If there are no accidents, I should leave tomorrow, Lawyer Zieg said casually. Lawyer Zieg said casually, and then asked about Miss Tiffany. When he came for official business, Miss Tiffany was the one in charge of receiving him. Of course, it was not because Gustav was unhappy, he was just curious. Aunt Tiffany is on leave today, Mr. Gustav said, but she'll attend the mysterious banquet tonight. Lawyer Zieg may be able to see her at the banquet. Of course, if you need, I can contact Aunt Tiffany now. No need. Lawyer Zieg thought. He waved his hand and said, "It's very ungentlemanly to disturb a lady's vacation, my Mr. Gustav." "You're right." Mr. Gustav nodded repeatedly. But he couldn't help but connect some scattered things together in his mind, such as the mysterious Mr. Dillings and the mark on the mysterious old leather suitcase in his suitcase, tonight's mysterious banquet, and Lawyer Zieg's sudden visit. Oh right. Before coming here, Mr. Gustav even heard a rumor that Mr. Dillings seemed to know head chef Borg, and even knew some of the bad habits of this head chef. After Lawyer Zieg came to the room, he suddenly asked curiously, "Mr. Gustav, is there any special guest in the hotel today?" Gustav understood, but he pretended to be puzzled and asked, "Why do you say so, Lawyer Zieg?" Lawyer Zieg said casually, "I saw the helicopter parked over there. It usually doesn't start, right?" Mr. Gustav nodded and said, "Yes, there's a guest today. He came by helicopter. He's now staying in the presidential suite." He didn't even intend to say Mr. Dilling's name. He just mentioned it and observed Lawyer Zieg's expression. But he didn't see any expression of expectation on the lawyer's face. Lawyer Zieg just nodded and encouraged Mr. Gustav with a few words, telling him to work hard and so on. Nevertheless, Mr. Gustav increasingly felt that Mr. Dillings, Lawyer Zieg, the owner behind the hotel, must have a special relationship with him. Maybe after leaving here, he could visit Mr. Dillings. After all, he wasn't feeling well today. It was a very reasonable and impeccable reason. Chapter 14:23. One of them. Simple people, action could only be considered action after the idea was put into practice. Mr. Gustav soon came to Mr. Dilling's room. But Mr. Dillings was facing some kind of trouble. Two doormen were trying on a tuxedo for Mr. Dillings. Mr. Dilling's figure would probably give most tailors in the world a headache. This was the largest tuxedo that the hotel could provide. The two doormen were trying to tie Mr. Dilling's waist. It was like a tug-of-war. Oh, damn it. I feel like I'm going to be cut into two pieces. This sh*t. It's so annoying. Am I going to become a German sausage? Mr. Dillings cursed loudly while suffering. When he saw Mr. Gustav come in, he quickly said, "Mr. Gustav, you're just in time. Come and help me, let me end this disaster as soon as possible." Mr. Gustav had no choice but to step forward and help him. It took him quite a bit of effort to get Mr. Dillings to put on the tuxedo. Of course, there was the occasional sound of buttons being pulled. Mr. Gustav was even worried that the buttons would explode in the next moment. Damn it! Damn it! Even if you beat me to death, I will never wear this thing again. Really? I swear on the honor of my dead grandmother. Mr. Dillings gasped and cursed. Usually, such an oath wasn't worth believing. Mr. Gustav pretended that he didn't hear it, and then quietly made a gesture to let the two doormen wait outside the room. He pretended to ask casually, "Mr. Dillings, are you going to attend the banquet?" "Of course. Otherwise, why would I wear this suit?" Mr. Dillings was not in a good mood because of the tight clothes. Mr. Gustav understood and then smiled. "Excuse me, is there anything else I can help you with, Mr. Dillings?" "Oh, let me think." Mr. Dillings pondered for a moment and shook his head. "I don't think there's anything else. If there's anything else, I can find you, right? I remember the housekeeper is always on call?" "Yes, Mr. Dillings." After thinking for a while, Mr. Dillings patted Gustav's shoulder. He didn't raise his hand, so one of Gustav's shoulders slumped a little. He could only maintain his smile and wait for the customer to speak. "You've worked hard," Mr. Dillings said. After thinking for a while, he continued, But you still need to rest when you need to. Don't tire yourself out. Mr. Gustav opened his mouth, but in the end, he maintained a smile and nodded. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Dillings. Is there anything else you need? Oh, I'm still a little hungry. Can you prepare something for me to eat? Dee Lindsay rubbed her big belly, which was firmly pierced. Let that chef make me something to eat. I don't want to go out now. These damn clothes are so unbearable. Mr. Gustav didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he still maintained his professional smile. I'll arrange it for you, sir. If there's nothing else, please allow me to leave first because I still need to serve Lawyer Zieg. When Mr. Gustav said the name Lawyer Zieg, he seemed casual, but he secretly paid attention to Mr. Dilling's expression. Oh, go ahead, I'll do it myself. But Mr. Dillings didn't know who Lawyer Zieg was. He didn't even care that Gustav said he needed to serve someone else. Didn't he know that the housekeeper here served the guests of the presidential suite one-on-one? With this doubt in his mind, Gustav slowly left the room. Before he closed the door, he took a peek through the crack of the door. Mr. Dillings opened a small book in his hand and bit a pencil. He was thinking about something. Occasionally, he tapped his head with the pencil, and occasionally scratched his thinning hair. Tell me where this gentleman is going as soon as possible, got it? Before leaving, Mr. Gustav ordered the doorman outside the door. But Mr. Dillings did not come out of his room until the dinner began. Mr. Guthoff was told by the bellboy that Mr. Dillings had gone to sleep after he had eaten his fill, and his snoring was very spectacular. The second one. Gift at 7:30 in the evening, the banquet started. The banquet was held in the open-air lawn of the hotel park. Not only could one enjoy the night view of the artificial lake, but they could also see the entire Alexa Hotel. Under the lamplight, the Alec Grand Hotel was like a symmetrical castle built with perfect lines. It was like something that could only be found in fairy tales. It was said that the original Alexa Hotel wasn't like this. After several renovations, it became what it was today. It was all the work of the mysterious hotel owner. The theme of tonight's banquet was Masquerade Ball. The guests would wear some simple accessories to cover their faces. Of course, most of the time, it was difficult to hide one's identity with simple accessories. Most of the time, it was just for the atmosphere. Miss Tiffany wore a simple eye mask. As for Miss Xanthi, she wore a Venetian mask. It was obvious that Miss Xanthi was very upset that her friend of many years chose to attend this masquerade ball instead of going to the birthday party with her. She really prepared a lot of young and energetic guys. What a waste. What happened today? I seem to see a lot of familiar faces. Miss Tiffany suddenly whispered to her friend's ear. Really? Miss Xanthi looked around. Miss Tiffany pointed at two middle-aged men standing in the dining area not far away. The two over there, don't they look like George and Gobin? Who? Miss Xanthi asked in surprise. Madame Tiffany shook her head and laughed. If they know that you have completely forgotten about them, they might cry. Forgotten? They were your pursuers back then. Miss Xanthi tried hard to recall, and finally found two blurry faces in the corner of her memory. She woke up with a start and finally remembered who George and Gobin were. In Chef Berger's restaurant, there used to be a small stage for performing for customers, and George and Gobin were the musicians in charge of the performance. Miss Xanthi said proudly, "Now that I think about it, I was very popular back then. Unfortunately, time is unforgiving. But at that time, all of them were par who liked to play the violin. You too." Miss Tiffany glanced at this guy who she didn't know was a bad friend or a good friend. Miss Xanthi said at this time, "But now that I think about it, it was really a mistake to be obsessed with Parr. A man who suddenly disappeared in pursuit of his dream is really bad. And look, my God! I really can't imagine what George and Gobin look like now. They were actually quite handsome back then. Maybe Parr has become a greasy and fat middle-aged man now. Believe me, dear, when a man gets old, he will never care about his appearance. You can see what my husband looks like now." Miss Tiffany didn't say anything. Miss Xanthi was probably the heartless type. She suddenly seemed to have a body that still had some capital at this age. She scratched her head and said, "No, I have to go and say hello to George and Gobin and relive the beautiful days of my youth. Tiffany, you take care of yourself." Miss Tiffany really didn't know how to stop this guy. She shook her head with a bitter smile, and then asked for a glass of red wine from the waiter's plate. She walked slowly in the open-air banquet hall by herself. She really recognized some old faces that she hadn't seen for a long time. Some of the old staff who used to work in Alexa Hotel. What was going on today? Miss Tiffany didn't go up and greet those people like Miss Xanthi did. After all, she didn't think she was as thick-skinned as Miss Xanthi. And in fact, she didn't have good relationships with people. She was old-fashioned, disciplined, and serious. They were all afraid of a boring woman like her. Even her ex-husband chose to leave because of the boredom of life. She felt that perhaps she had been boring for most of her life. So she began to change. She didn't always think about work. Occasionally, she would read books, do some beauty treatments, try some sports, and also watch boring but popular movies. She began to smile more than before, but when she smiled, she still gave people a sense of oppression. Miss Tiffany felt that she probably couldn't change it. Her life was still improving, but the number of friends around her didn't increase or decrease. "Miss Tiffany, you are really beautiful tonight," she heard a voice calling out to her. Tiffany slowly turned around and saw an old man with a head full of white hair and a simple eye patch. She even recognized the other party's identity at first glance. "Lawyer Sieg, it's you?" She couldn't help but be surprised. "Why are you here?" "I've been looking for you." Lawyer Sieg walked slowly with a smile. "I heard from Gustav that you would also attend the banquet, so I've been looking for you since the beginning." "Thank you." Miss Tiffany smiled slightly. Then, she quickly realized that this banquet might have something to do with Lawyer Sieg. So many old employees had also appeared. According to her nephew, Gustav, the gentleman who stayed in the presidential suite had the mark of the hotel's owner on him. Did all of this mean that something special was going to happen tonight? "Miss Tiffany, happy birthday," Lawyer Sieg suddenly said. Lawyer Sieg suddenly said, then took out a gift box from his pocket. "This is the birthday present I prepared for you, please accept it." "Thank you." Miss Tiffany didn't refuse. She accepted it graciously, hugged Lawyer Sieg, and kissed him on the cheek. Lawyer Sieg joked at this time, "Oh, I think I must be envied now." "Lawyer Sieg is as funny as always." Miss Tiffany smiled, "But you haven't told me why you are here. Don't tell me you specially came to give me a gift?" She wasn't too surprised that Lawyer Sieg gave her a gift. Lawyer Sieg basically knew the birthday of every senior employee in the hotel. If time permitted, he would even take time out to celebrate with the employees. It had always been like this in the past. In Miss Tiffany's memory, Lawyer Sieg had attended her birthday banquets several times. Of course, if he was just an ordinary employee, most of the time he would only give a small gift with his signature. He wouldn't appear in person. It was a kind of incentive mechanism. "I just happened to be invited by an old friend." Lawyer Sieg blinked at this time. "Then enjoy tonight's banquet, Miss Tiffany. Finally, I wish you a happy birthday." "Thank you." That being said, until now, the host of this banquet still hadn't appeared, but the guests seemed to have arrived. Number 3. Sound. It should be the most crowded time at dinner time, but the hotel was very quiet at this time, because most of the guests were attending the outdoor banquet outside. Even most of the chefs in the restaurant were sent out to prepare food for the banquet. In the corridor, a bloated figure was walking quickly at this moment. Mr. Dillings. At this moment, his lips were a little pale. He was carrying an old leather suitcase with one hand and grabbing his trousers with the other. He was panting as he walked in the corridor. He overslept. Mr. Dillings couldn't help but sigh. He wanted to take a rest after eating. There was something very important to do tonight, so he hoped he wouldn't miss the time. Oh damn head chef Berg, why did his food taste so good? Suddenly being absent-minded. Maybe it was because he didn't exercise. Mr. Dillings suddenly felt a bit difficult to breathe. His heart seemed to make a sad sound like an overloaded old engine. He felt that his breathing was extremely difficult, and the sudden dizziness even made him lose his balance. At this time, the suitcase in his hand was thrown out. The suitcase rolled down the stairs of the second floor of the hotel lobby. Unlike a rubber ball, the suitcase would not be damaged when it finally landed. When the dizziness subsided, Mr. Dillings climbed up and saw that the suitcase rolling down the stairs had been opened. He was shocked and quickly walked down the stairs while holding onto the handrail. The violin and the bow in the suitcase were scattered in two places. Mr. Dillings bent down to pick up the bow with difficulty, and then walked to the violin. However, a beautiful hand had already picked up the violin before he arrived. Mr. Dyram couldn't help but be startled. "Oh, it's you two. Weren't they the couple he met several times today?" Mr. Dillings looked at Boss Luo and Miss Maid's clothes, thinking that they were also preparing to attend the banquet outside. At this moment, the violin was in Luocchio's hand. After picking it up, Boss Luo stretched out his hand to stroke the back of the violin, and then slowly turned it around, only to see that the bridge was broken. Even two strings were broken, and a corner of the head was broken. "What a pity," Luocchio said softly. He held the violin with both hands, giving it to Mr. Dillings. How could he not see what the violin looked like at this moment? Mr. Dillings' face instantly turned black as he stood there in a daze. He kept muttering to himself, saying what to do, and so on, as if he would faint at any moment. In the end, Mr. Dillings took the violin in silence. Then he sighed slowly and smiled bitterly. "I'm such a rash person. I can't do anything right." He didn't know if he was talking to himself or to someone else. He was probably talking to himself. "Is this violin very important to you, Mr. Dillings?" Boss Luo suddenly asked. Mr. Dillings didn't think much and nodded. "It was given to me by a very important friend. I couldn't keep it well. If I say that I can fix this violin for you..." Luocchio looked at Mr. Dillings' eyes and said slowly, "But the price is that you have to give it to me. Will you agree?" Mr. Dillings was stunned. He looked at the direction the young man was pointing at and found that he was pointing at a notebook with a brown cover on the ground. This was his notebook, which was also in the suitcase. It should have fallen out together with the suitcase. "You want it?" Mr. Dillings looked at this young Oriental man inconceivably and couldn't help but ask, "Why?" "Probably because you like it," Luocchio said with a smile. Miss Maid had already picked up the leather case when the master was talking with Mr. Dillings. When she handed the leather case to Mr. Dillings, Miss Maid casually glanced at the mark on the leather case. Then, her eyes slightly moved as if she thought of something. Mr. Dillings thought for a while and then shook his head with a bitter smile. "Not to mention a notebook, if you can really fix this violin for me, I'll pay you double, because it's really important to me. But even if you can fix it, it's too late. I can't wait that long." "That's not necessarily true." Boss Luo smiled mysteriously and then took the violin from Mr. Dillings. "Please wait for a moment, Mr. Dillings." While Mr. Dillings was in a daze, Boss Luo walked to a corner of the lobby with the violin, and soon disappeared from Mr. Dillings's sight. Mr. Dillings had to hold the bow in his hand and stood there stupidly. Only Miss Maid looked at him, as if she was sizing him up. In fact, he didn't go far, but went to the back of the stairs to avoid their sight. Boss Luo picked up the broken violin in his hand. His palm naturally emitted a faint light. Then, he began to slowly wipe his hand across the head of the zither. The head, the shaft, and the pillow, the broken parts began to be repaired little by little, even the broken strings. Boss Luo closed his eyes and finally put the repaired violin to his ear. His fingers gently plucked the new strings. "You can use it to realize your dream. You will succeed. I'll wait for you here." "It's fixed, Mr. Dillings." Mr. Dillings took the restored violin with both of his hands in disbelief, and looked at it carefully. He even suspected that Boss Luo specially gave him a new one, but when he thought that Boss Luo only asked for a notebook, he felt that it was really incredible. No one would go out of their way to buy a new violin just for a notebook, right? How did you do it? Mr. Dillings looked at this amazing Oriental young man in amazement. It's a trade secret. Boss Luo blinked, and then Miss Maid handed the notebook to him. Then, according to the agreement, this notebook belongs to me, Mr. Dillings. Okay. Mr. Dillings nodded subconsciously. If you like it, take it. Did he really do him a big favor just like that? Looking at the two people leaving hand in hand, Mr. Dillings scratched his head and muttered, "Good people? Oh, number 4, please dance with me." Lady Xanthe walked around and came back. Although her expression couldn't be seen clearly because of the mask, her attitude and words clearly indicated one thing: she had gained a lot. It was probably the compliments of her young suitors. "Darling, are you going to stay here all night and drink wine by yourself? Since when did your life become so boring?" Miss Tiffany didn't want to pay attention to this guy. She was tired of standing, so she pulled out a chair and sat down. "Aunt Tiffany and Miss Sandy." A familiar figure appeared in front of them. It was Mr. Gustav. He walked slowly and politely greeted the two ladies. "Gustav, you're still so handsome. How's your work?" Miss Sandy said casually. Tonight's banquet was well done. No matter from the service, the setting, the orchestra that created the atmosphere, the food and drinks, they were all flawless. More importantly, Miss Sandy also relived the good memories of her youth. "Thank you for your compliment, Miss Sandy." Miss Tiffany rubbed her eyebrows and said, "Gustav, the anonymous guest who initiated this banquet, hasn't he appeared yet?" "Not yet." Mr. Gustav also shook his head in confusion. "We can't even contact this guest. He just said that he would appear at the banquet, that's all. If the fee hadn't been paid in advance, I would have thought it was a prank. There are all kinds of weird people these days." Miss Sandy shrugged and said her opinion. Miss Tiffany suddenly asked curiously, "Oh right, that Mr. Dillings you mentioned in the afternoon, have you seen him?" After all, it was very likely that he was related to the owner of the hotel. As a butler who had been serving the Alec Hotel, Tiffany was more or less curious. Tonight, it was mainly because of this Mr. Dillings that she came here. Miss Sandy was very curious about who this Dillings was, but the aunt and nephew obviously didn't care about her curiosity. Mr. Gustav shook his head. "Not yet." Miss Tiffany slowly sighed and said slowly, "It's fine if you don't see him. Gustav, I'm a little tired today. I want to go back early to rest. I'll end my vacation tomorrow and return to work." "Aunt Tiffany, is it your first day off today?" Mr. Gustav couldn't help but be startled. Miss Tiffany shook her head. "There's nothing to do on vacation. It's more interesting to work. I'm not at the age where I can do nothing." Miss Sandy felt that this sentence really hurt her. If it weren't for the sake of these decades of good friends, she would have ignored it. She simply sat down angrily and complained. Miss Tiffany just pretended not to hear it and was about to leave the banquet hall. The lights suddenly dimmed and Miss Tiffany stopped her footsteps. The sudden change also made the banquet hall suddenly quiet. Then the lights began to change. They began to intertwine and finally intertwined at the position where the orchestra was playing. Under the lights, a bloated figure was struggling to walk on the temporarily built performance stage. But his figure was too big. This should have been very attractive if it was a handsome man. The bloated man's face was wearing a fake beard and a fake big nose, which gave a very funny feeling. Even when the man walked to the microphone, one of the buttons of the tight tuxedo finally couldn't support and broke off. Oh, the banquet hall suddenly burst into continuous laughter. This might be a special performance for the banquet to make the guests happy, something like a clown. "Isn't this Mr. Dillings?" Under the stage, Mr. Gustav, who also saw this scene, couldn't help but open his mouth. He really didn't know why the guest of the presidential suite ran on the stage at this time. And looking at the way Mr. Dillings was holding the violin at this time, did he want to perform on the stage? Why did Mr. Dillings run on the stage, who can tell me? Mr. Gustav hurriedly pulled a waiter beside him and asked. I don't know, Mr. Gustav frowned. He subconsciously looked for where Lawyer Sieg was, but he saw that the lawyer was watching the scene on the stage with interest at this time, with a faint smile on his face. This made Mr. Gustav even more confused. However, he didn't have time to think about it because Mr. Dillings had already made his move on the stage. He gently placed the bow on the strings of the zither, as if he was planning to pull the strings. The guests under the stage were quiet. They were a little bit looking forward to what kind of performance this gentleman, who brought a joke when he appeared, was going to do next. Miss Tiffany just silently looked at the violin in Mr. Dilling's hand. That violin! She could recognize it at first glance. It was obtained from someone else in a very special way. She even regretted it and suffered, but now she had almost forgotten it. Give it to me, use it to realize your dream. You will succeed. I'll wait for you here. She slowly walked from the crowd to the stage, playing almost only a few preludes, but people had already recognized what this bloated Mr. Dillings was going to play, Canon D major. But Mr. Dillings' skill was too bad. He couldn't even be called a beginner. The intermittent sound of the violin made this performance quite different. Even the orchestra that was originally invited, and even the conductor seemed to be unable to cooperate well with this gentleman's violin skills at this time. This was very bad. People began to talk that such a performance was likely to ruin this banquet. Unexpectedly, at this moment, suddenly several guests wearing masks walked on the stage. No one knew whether they were spontaneous or prepared in advance. These guests all brought their own different musical instruments, including George and Gobin, who not long ago recalled the memories of their youth for Ms. Xanthi. Strangely, the orchestra invited by Mr. Gustav couldn't cooperate with Mr. Dilling's clumsy skills, but these guests naturally followed Mr. Dilling's rhythm and slowly played their respective instruments. Although all the sounds were mixed, they were still intermittent, occasionally stuttering, and even wrong note. Mr. Gustav listened and even frowned if this Mr. Dillings wasn't a guest of the presidential suite, if he didn't feel that he had any connection with the hotel's behind-the-scenes owner. There were too many ifs, so he had to endure it. However, Ms. Xanthi, who was sitting next to him, seemed to be fascinated by the performance, and occasionally let out some laughter. She probably remembered some past event. Suddenly, the crowd began to disperse, as if spontaneously. The guests slowly retreated, forming a half-moon space. Gustav saw Aunt Tiffany standing in the empty space. She stood there alone, and didn't know when she closed her eyes. He wanted to call her, but she slowly reached out her hand at this time. Her right hand stretched forward, as if it was holding someone's palm. Her left hand also lifted up, as if it was falling on someone's shoulder. She seemed to be not alone. She began to slowly move her body, following the flawed canon played by the impromptu orchestra on the stage. The moonlight tonight was perfect. It seemed that someone's figure appeared and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, appearing and disappearing, as if it was there but not there. I seemed to see Par? Miss Xanthi rubbed her eyes. When she looked again, she didn't see anything. All she saw was her friend dancing there alone. Maybe she should stop her, after all. This behavior was too rash. But why should she stop it? She had never seen Tiffany like this before. She was like a young girl with a dream, wasn't she? And no one said anything. Amidst this clumsy performance and the solo dance, something seemed to flow through everyone's hearts, making everything quiet. The moonlight also gradually became gentle. Far away, outside the crowd, on the beach of the artificial lake below the banquet site, Ms. Maid took off her shoes and stepped on the white sand. Luaccio was the same. He was gently holding her waist, dancing around Dance Here. Number 5. Happy birthday. Tiffany gradually slowed down and finally did the pose of the end dance. Her eyes were still closed, as if she was immersed in some kind of afterglow. Mr. Dilling's clumsy performance had also finished. In fact, he had stopped for a while, about a few minutes. Finally, Miss Tiffany slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were hazy, as if she saw a distant figure, gradually disappearing into the night. When she closed her eyes, he came with the onset of Canon D major. When she opened her eyes, he was gone at the end of Canon D major. Only she was still here. Miss Tiffany suddenly felt an indescribable relief. She didn't even feel embarrassed for her different behavior. She slowly sighed, and then looked at the bloated man on the stage. According to Gustav's description, she thought this must be Mr. Dilling's. But she still couldn't remember who this Mr. Dilling's was, although she had some guesses that this Mr. Dilling's was likely to come for her. As if he had already noticed Miss Tiffany's gaze. At this time, Mr. Dilling's took some effort to take out a note from his pocket. He looked at the note, walked to the microphone, and softly read, "I hope you will always be young and happy. I hope you can walk out of the haze of life. All the love is contained here." The voice entered everyone's ears and heart. Miss Tiffany opened her mouth slightly. She was about to say something, but the surrounding guests suddenly swarmed at this time. They shouted in unison, "Tiffany! Happy birthday! Happy birthday! Long time no see, do you still remember me? Tiffany, happy birthday! You're still as beautiful as ever. Tiffany! I really regret that I didn't pursue you back then. Happy birthday!" She was almost drowned in the blessings of the crowd, looking at those who took off their masks, one by one familiar faces. Those were the faces of the old people who used to work here. Miss Tiffany was suddenly at a loss. At this moment, Lawyer Zieg slowly walked out of the crowd with a cake in his hand. He walked up to Tiffany and said, "Happy birthday, my dear Tiffany. I hope you'll like the birthday party I've prepared for you." Miss Tiffany was startled at first, then she felt relieved. Right, so this was prepared by Lawyer Zieg. Only Lawyer Zieg had the ability to invite so many old employees from all over the country. At this time, Ms. Xanthi also came out of the crowd, looking at her good friend with complaint. Obviously, she didn't know all this, but now she was helpless. "No wonder you rejected the birthday party I prepared for you, so this is the reason." She really loved this good sister of hers for decades. She hugged this happy person beside her tightly and looked at the people around her. Turned out that a 55-year-old birthday could be so wonderful. Miss Tiffany kept smiling, accepting the blessings of the crowd. She looked for the bloated figure who played the violin in the crowd. But he was no longer here. She didn't know when he left. Maybe later, she would go find this mysterious Mr. Dilling's and ask him about the violin. She was always a little concerned. A sixth, flowing golden years. Happiness and happiness. It was probably this simple. A 55-year-old woman didn't seem to have many things she wanted. She didn't have a husband now, she didn't even have her own children, and she had been single for 5 years. Life was so boring that it could only be decorated simply to see the unprecedented beauty. Miss Tiffany felt that she should sleep very soundly tonight, but before that, she wanted to see this Mr. Dilling's once. "Have you checked out?" "Yes, Miss Tiffany. This is the thing that the gentleman said he wanted to pass to you when he left." At the floor, the doorman put an old leather suitcase in front of Miss Tiffany and then left. The first thing she saw was the mark that Gustav had mentioned on the leather case. Miss Tiffany pondered for a moment, then slowly opened the suitcase, taking out the violin hidden inside with both hands. And the bow. She walked to the window, looking at everything outside that was gray. Downstairs, she seemed to see someone again. Who would have thought that she would wave at him? After waving her hand, that person slowly turned around and walked away. She kept walking and walking until she was far away. In the end, she disappeared. Miss Tiffany looked at it for a while, then she held the violin and bow in her hands, closed her eyes, and softly hummed the canon, Major. Today was a beautiful day. Today was truly a beautiful day, like a dream or a fantasy. That him. Today it was time to draw a full stop. Mr. Dillings walked along the road alone, and from time to time glanced back at the marvelous Hotel Alec behind him. Then, he finally met the master and servant of the club, who just came back from the artificial beach. Miss Maid was still barefoot, and her shoes were held between her fingers. They came back arm in arm, and seemed to be whispering something. Seeing Mr. Dillings alone, Boss Luo took the initiative to greet him. "Good evening, Mr. Dillings." "You too." Mr. Dillings laughed. "You really helped me just now. Otherwise, I will definitely screw up the whole thing. If you have a chance to come to Hallstatt, you must contact me. I'll treat you well. Oh, look at me. I'll write you my contact information." Mr. Dillings patted his head, then began to search for his clothes, but he couldn't find a pen and paper. As for the suitcase in his hand, it was empty. "Write it here." Boss Luo smiled, taking out the notebook and a pen from Mr. Dillings. Mr. Dillings quickly wrote down his contact information and address in the notebook. "Mr. Dillings, are you leaving now?" Mr. Dillings nodded. "Yes, I have to catch the early morning flight tomorrow. I have to go back to work on Monday. I didn't tell my wife this time. If I don't go back in time, believe me, she won't let me sleep on the bed. That's too miserable." Miss Maid giggled at this moment, which was very charming. Mr. Dillings was stunned, thinking that this young man was really lucky to have saved the Milky Way in his previous life. Luoqiu suddenly asked, "Can I ask you something, Mr. Dillings?" "Sure, go ahead." Boss Luo looked at the notebook in his hand, muttering, "Why are your last words on the stage different from what you wrote here?" Mr. Dillings gave a start, then thought for a while. "Well, I think it's better this way. Anyway, I'll always screw things up." Luoqiu just nodded with a smile, then said softly, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Dillings. I wish you a pleasant journey." That's all. Mr. Dillings was still as straightforward as before, leaving directly after saying goodbye, but he didn't see that Boss Luo slightly bowed to him behind him. It had been a long time since a bus came to the bus stop outside Alexa Hotel. Mr. Dillings couldn't help but feel a little distressed when he saw that the bus had stopped running. Maybe he should ask the front desk of the hotel to call a taxi for him, but Mr. Dillings reached into his trouser pocket, and sadly found that he had no money. He really had no money. He had spent almost all of his money on this trip, and even paid for all of his private savings, and 2 months of his salary in advance from his boss. He suddenly regretted so much that he even had an impulse to faint. God knows how to explain to his wife when he went back. Unexpectedly, at this time, a private car slowly approached Mr. Dillings and stopped. When the car door opened, a black old man in luxurious clothes waved at him. "Hello, Mr. Dillings." The old man invited Mr. Dillings into the car, looked at the puzzled Mr. Dillings, and smiled. "First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Sieg, and I'm the lawyer appointed by Par to deal with his inheritance. Among his inheritance, one of them was appointed by me to give to you, Mr. Dillings." Mr. Dillings blinked, then scratched his head, and asked confusedly, "Lawyer? Pars? That guy was so poor that he owed me half a year's rent. What inheritance could he have, except for a dog? But even so, you're still willing to fulfill his last wish, aren't you? He came here from the distant Austria, and even now, he has nothing." Lawyer Sieg smiled. "I think that in the last moments of Par's life, he must have felt extremely proud to have met a friend like you. Believe me, Mr. Dillings, you deserve this legacy. Your kindness and trustworthiness allowed you to pass Par's test, and in the end you even did better than him. So, Mr. Dillings, you'll get 40 million euros from Par." "What the f***ck? How much?" Mr. Dillings jumped up, and his head hit the roof of the car. He couldn't help but yell. It was very painful. Number 7. All the love is contained here. After returning to the room, Boss Luo opened a bottle of red wine in a good mood, and enjoyed the cool breeze with Miss Maid on the balcony. He opened Mr. Dilling's notebook and read it page by page. It contained all his plans for this trip, and each item was written very clearly. The last one was the completion of the list of things he needed to do. "Today I found something good," Boss Luo said with satisfaction. Miss Maid took the notebook from her master's hand and turned to the front of the notebook. There were words that were different from Mr. Dilling's handwriting. Miss Maid read the words in a low voice. "Hope you know that I never gave up our dream. When you were lonely and sad, you couldn't get any help or comfort from me. Because of this, I feel very sad. All the love is contained here. Someone loves you silently, and he or she may have gone far away." Chapter 14:24. When he woke up in the morning, Miss Maid had prepared everything, including today's breakfast. The breakfast wasn't made by the chef, but by Miss Maid herself. There was a prepared kitchen in the room, and even the ingredients were fresh. Mr. Jean called, saying that the car is ready, and we can leave at any time. Boss Luo was reading the newspaper while drinking fresh milk. Hearing this, he nodded, folded the newspaper and put it down, smiling. "I don't know if Taisetsu and Nero get along well these days," Miss Maid said. "They are both guys with good characters, so they should be able to get along well with each other." "That's good." After a simple breakfast, the short rest in this big hotel officially ended. Boss Luo met with Jin Zhongyuan in the lobby of the hotel, and then took the special car to St. Andrews according to his arrangement. Before leaving, Miss Maid quietly put a letter in the suggestion box in the lobby, and finally returned to her master's side. "What did you put in?" Boss Luo couldn't help but ask curiously. Miss Maid smiled slightly, a small suggestion. Boss Luo blinked, but didn't ask further. He just rolled down the window and then stretched out the camera lens from the window, taking a picture of the front of this big hotel. "Let's go," Luochio said to Jin Zhongyuan. A Greco hotel attached great importance to customers' suggestions. Usually, there would be a special bellboy responsible for receiving and checking the letters in the suggestion box, so that the management of the hotel could know what needed to be improved. This kind of service attitude was also the reason why it had always been favored. At this time, when several letters were taken out from the suggestion box and sent to the review room, a senior employee with reading glasses, who was said to have worked in the review room for 40 years, suddenly stood up. This senior rushed out of the review room at a speed of 100 meters, and then took the elevator all the way, hitting 2 dining cars in the middle. Finally, he came to the door of the hotel general manager's office, and hurriedly pushed the door open. At this time, the general manager of the Agrico Hotel was chatting with Lawyer Sieg about something. When he saw someone rashly barge in, his face naturally showed a displeased expression. However, Lawyer Sieg was quite familiar with this old employee in the review room, so he casually greeted him. "Old John, old friend, what's going on?" "Oh, Lawyer Sieg, you're here too." Old John was gasping for breath. "I didn't expect you to be here." "That's great. I think I have a letter here. Both of you must read it." Old John put the letter on the manager's desk. Both of them looked at it at the same time. It was just an ordinary white envelope. But when the envelope was flipped over and they saw the seal pattern on the seam, the two men who could control the fate of the hotel both slowed down their breathing at the same time. The general manager looked at Lawyer Sieg. Lawyer Sieg calmly took out a small knife, opened the envelope, and read it carefully. After a while, Lawyer Sieg didn't say anything. He even frowned slightly. The general manager couldn't help but ask, "Old Sieg, what's written on the letter?" Lawyer Sieg looked up and glanced at his partner of many years. He was somewhat puzzled. "It doesn't say anything special. It just asks for the small stage of the restaurant that was torn down before to be rebuilt. It also praises Mr. Berg, saying that his cooking skills are not bad. Finally, it asks him to slightly change some of his small bad habits in the kitchen." The general manager was startled, then slowly sighed and sat down. He said subconsciously, "That's good. Wait a minute. The general manager suddenly stood up again. So, the boss came here? When did it happen? Lawyer Zieg smiled bitterly. How would I know? After all, even I have never seen it. Yes, no one knew the identity of the owner behind the scenes of the Agrico Hotel. Even Mr. Zieg, as the acting lawyer, only communicated with the mysterious owner through letters. Lawyer Zieg had been the agent for 50 years. At that time, he was just a greenhorn, and no one hired him. He was even ostracized by others. St. Andrew's Town, outside the town, in a quiet manor. About 20 days ago, this manor was still overgrown with weeds and no one lived in it. But no one knew when it started. From the surroundings to the inside of the manor, it had become clean and tidy. The lawn in the courtyard of the manor was even neatly built. In the morning, the sunlight was scattered, and even the refraction of the sunlight could be seen. Judging from the situation, it was sprinkled not long ago. In the kitchen of the manor, a young man who always wore a scarf wrapped around the lower half of his face was now closing his eyes. At the same time, he was holding a sharp kitchen knife in his hand. Then, a square piece of energy tofu was thrown up. The young man raised the knife and cut the tofu pieces neatly, falling down like scattered petals. They were arranged neatly without even being placed on a plate. It was just like the unrealistic knife skills in Little Master. Yes. At this time, the young man carefully picked up the tofu pieces on the chopping board, and then put them into the boiling pot on the table behind him. In front of the table, a girl with short white hair was drooling while holding a pair of chopsticks in her mouth. She looked at the pieces of tofu falling into the pot, and there were even little stars in her eyes. It was not until the young man covered the pot again that she lay on the table like a withered eggplant and stared at the flames burning in the gas stove without blinking. Taisetsu and Nero. Why is it so troublesome? Nero frowned at this time. Taisetsu sat upright and said indifferently, Didn't you say yesterday that you wanted to eat sukiyaki? Yesterday was yesterday. Nero complained, You should have done it yesterday, not today. It's still breakfast time. Taisetsu Appa, I seriously doubt that you can't find a girlfriend in the future. After getting along with each other for nearly a month, they were probably familiar with each other. Taisetsu, who knew her character, just grabbed the chopsticks fiercely and knocked the hand that was about to open the pot lid. I want to duel with you. Miss Nero suddenly stepped on the table and pulled out her Yama sword. Taisetsu glanced at Nero expressionlessly and slowly poured fresh eggs into the bowl. The boss and Miss Yu Yi will be back at noon. Are you sure you want to have a duel? If you destroy this place, there probably won't be enough time to repair it. By the way, you have destroyed this place 3 times, and this is Miss Yu Ye's property. Miss Nero was stunned again. She grabbed her hair and said painfully, Can you not mention this sad thing in front of me? She hadn't finished copying the book as punishment yet. It was impossible to copy a book. It would never be possible to copy a book. She would never copy it even if she was beaten to death. Anyway, she couldn't be beaten to death now. It's almost time to eat. Taisetsu opened the pot lid and ate without paying any attention to her. Nero's entire body softened at this moment, like a caterpillar. She crawled all the way from the ground and then crawled onto Daz. She had mastered the magical body mutation ability of the Black Soul Envoy to perfection. She said in a voice that could make Taisetsu sick to death, Taisetsu Appa, you won't say it, right? I know you're the best. Come on, Taisetsu Appa. I can do embarrassing things with you. You'd better use these tricks on the boss. Taisetsu gently exhaled and directly bounced the caterpillar Nero away. Nero patted the dust on her body and stood up. She muttered, I'm afraid that Mississippi maid will kill me quietly. Taisetsu gave her a look that said, It's good that you know it. Nero rolled back to her seat again and picked up her chopsticks as if she had forgotten the upcoming fear of the boss and Mississippi maid, or perhaps she was heartless. If you finish eating, quickly finish copying the books as punishment. Taisetsu put down his chopsticks and reminded, You still have to save yourself. Nero stuck out her tongue and made a face. I can't be saved. Anyway, I can't finish copying. At most, I'll double it. Then I'll continue to copy. Double it. If I can't finish copying, it's not a burden to have too much debt. Taisetsu shook his head angrily. I'll go to the town later to replenish the ingredients. If you don't copy the books, clean the place again. You know Yuyi doesn't like dust. Nero said pitifully, Taisetsu Appa, I can't do this kind of work. I'll go shopping, okay? Taisetsu only thought for a moment and agreed. He was indeed worried about letting Nero clean. Before she became a Black Soul envoy, she seemed to spend all her time learning how to fight other than eating. More than 10 days ago, he did fight with Nero for some inexplicable reason. If he didn't have the Zhanlu sword, he might not be able to suppress Nero's full combat power. Then, I'm going out. After eating 6/7 of the shoshi soup, Nero excitedly turned into a wisp of black smoke and went out of the door. Since the last time she was rubbed on the ground by Daz, she was grounded for 10 days. She was so bored that she was moldy. Looking at Nero's excitement, Taisetsu couldn't help but shake his head slightly. He smiled and said, You're really energetic. But maybe it's a good thing, Taisetsu thought. He still remembered her persistence in life when she said that she wanted to become a Black Soul envoy. He stretched his body and tidied up the things on the table. Then, he took a broom and began to clean. His life now was actually quite good. In Human Domain, the headquarters of the Magician Association, the sarcophagus was placed at the place where the Tower Masters usually gathered. The lid of the sarcophagus had been opened, and they could see the body of the Mithril Tower Master lying quietly in the sarcophagus. As for the legendary werewolf hero Kaloya, he stood silently beside the sarcophagus. The atmosphere here had always been dead silent. In addition to the few Tower Masters and the deacons of the Secret Arts Tower, there were actually some onlookers, but they didn't appear in front of everyone. At this moment, Long Shirua and the little butterfly monster were standing behind the screen behind Hui Yao's seat, which represented the seat of the first Tower Master. She didn't ask for it, but Hui Yao arranged it. The Thunder Tower Master was examining the body of the Mithril Tower Master. Until now, he heaved a heavy sigh. Although there was still sadness in his eyes, he still said in a low voice, I'm afraid we can't use the resurrection potion. When one's strength reached the level of a Tower Master, the death of the physical body didn't mean true death. As long as the spirit was not extinguished, there were several ways to resurrect the body. The key was that the spirit fire couldn't be extinguished. The Thunder Tower Master's judgment made the deacons of the Secret Arts Tower pale. As for the Crimson Blaze Tower Master and his wife, they frowned at the same time. The Thunder Tower Master shook his head and said, The spirit fire of the Mithril Tower is gone. How is that possible? Gone? The Crimson Blaze Tower Master was the most impatient. He hurriedly asked, Thunder, what do you mean it's gone? Are you sure it's not gone? Indeed, it's gone. The Thunder Tower Master said sternly, Even if it's extinguished, there should still be a remnant. But I can't find a single trace of it on Secret Steel's body. It's as if his spiritual fire was forcefully dug out by someone. Whoosh! The Crimson Blaze Tower Master's body suddenly ignited with raging flames, like a furnace being blown by a blower. In an instant, the entire place became overflowing with heat waves. He even glared fiercely at the legend hero, Kaloya. The old werewolf leader was not afraid of the Tower Master's gaze. Crimson Blaze, are you doubting me? The atmosphere gradually became tense. As the first Tower Master, Hui Yao's expression was calm. He gently tapped the ground with his magic wand. He didn't even use a trace of magic power. Both Kaloya and Crimson Blaze were silenced at the same time. They looked at each other with disdain and snorted coldly. However, they quieted down for the time being. Hui Yao then said slowly, Kaloya, tell us everything from the beginning. You must tell us everything in detail, including the conversation between you and Balegan. Kaloya nodded and didn't intend to hide anything. He started to tell the story from Huang Jinglong's attack on the werewolf territory. Everyone listened in silence, and their expressions gradually became more and more solemn. Because they were in that place. Behind the screen, the little butterfly monster who was listening in a daze suddenly got close to Sister Long's ear and asked, "Sister Long, what is the spirit fire that they were talking about?" "Actually, it's the soul that Kelowna talked about," Long Shirua said casually. "Although the way they walk is different, these magicians can ignite the spirit fire and reach the level of the Taoist's soul out of the body. It's hard to say which side is more powerful. I can only say that each side has its own merit. There are 3,000 paths, but they all lead to the same destination." The little butterfly monster still had a cute expression as if she didn't know anything. She had never been interested in the matter of cultivation. The Shinryu of Kelowna was too lazy to lecture this big-breasted butterfly at this moment. It was obvious that her talent had been transformed, but it was becoming more and more likely to turn a good hand into a bad one. What she cared about at this moment was what Kaloya said. What she cared about was whether this matter was related to Luochio. Chapter 1425. In the hall, after listening to Kaloya's narration, the Tower Masters remained silent. Of course, they had the ability to distinguish whether what Kaloya said was the truth or a lie. It was precisely because they knew that it was not a lie that their faces became heavy or even ugly. 100 years. They're still back. Hui Yao's voice was very soft, but it could be heard by everyone present. However, the word "sure" that the first Tower Master used contained a deeper meaning. Could it be that the first Tower Master already knew that they were still alive after the war 100 years ago? This made Redfire and the other two Tower Masters immediately think of an incident that happened a few years after the war. Farrell of the Night Organization went berserk and almost destroyed the organization. "There's something here." The Thunder Tower Master frowned and said, "We just received the information. According to our understanding, Farrell escaped from the prison of the Night Organization a few days ago. Now, his whereabouts are unknown. Could it be related to the matter of the secret steel?" No one could give the Thunder Tower Master an answer. Hui Yao pondered for a moment and said, "It's too early to make any judgments now. As for the specific reason, I'll personally go to the battlefield site to investigate and make a judgment." He began to give out orders. "Redfire, Frost, both of you stay at the headquarters and guard against the Michael Association's invasion. Thunder, follow me to the battlefield site. Also, arrange for 2 more deacons to follow me. As for the compensation for Fafner's destruction of many areas, I'll leave it to you, Frost, to deal with it." These were all expected things to be done, so they quickly nodded and agreed. The Radiance Tower Master thought for a moment and said, "Oh right, let Deacon Ace personally go to the territory of the Toridu clan. The humans there have successfully overthrown the Toridu clan. Now they seem to have established a prototype similar to a theocracy. They even have many weapons that can fight against the vampires." If it was a normal day, the Tower Masters would be very shocked by this matter. However, under the high pressure brought by them, the conflict between the farm humans and the vampire clans would be reduced by 1 level. Only Kaloya frowned and said, "Radiance Tower Master, you said that the Toridu clan has been overthrown? When did it happen?" It had to be known that he was still in Baelgang's territory yesterday. But at that time, the clan's territory had only been destroyed by Fafna. How could the territory be overthrown by humans overnight? "I'm not too sure about the details." The Radiance Pagoda Master shook his head. "Back then, I encountered some special matters and was held back, and now, I can only observe for the time being. We, the Magician Association, won't take the initiative to mind the war between the 13 clans and the descendants of the ancients. In the end, this is their internal conflict." Kuraloya remained silent. No one knew what he was thinking, but he felt that everything was in a complete mess. It was as if something had suddenly stirred up a calm lake, causing everything to become turbid. No one could clearly see what the bottom of the lake looked like. Right, there's one more thing. The Radiance Pagoda's master did not pay attention to Kuraloya's attitude for the time being. Instead, he said, "This time, I took in a student on my way out. She should be here with my token. If I don't come back, arrange for her to stay in my magic tower." The Radiance Pagoda master actually accepted a student? Looking at the reaction of the pagoda masters, it was obvious that this was a big matter. "Teacher, this time I will personally go there and accompany you to see the ruins of this battlefield." At this time, Hui Yao used his spiritual sense to communicate with Kelowna Shinryu, who was hiding behind him. "Okay." Long Shirua nodded. "You just do your own thing. Don't worry about me. I'm just going there to take a look." Of course, if Hui Yao was in danger, with Long Shirua's character, she obviously would not stand by and do nothing. For the Radiance Pagoda Master, with such a powerful partner like Kelowna Shinryu by his side, he naturally had more confidence. There were a total of 7 members of the investigation team: the Radiance Pagoda Master, the Thunder Pagoda Master, 2 deacons of the Secret Arts Pagoda, and Kuraloya. The other members were Shinryu and the little butterfly monster. This is the Eastern Evil Dragon that once gave the Inhuman Domain a headache? Kuraloya rubbed his chin and looked at Kelowna Shinryu, who seemed very thin and weak to him. "She's actually a girl?" Other than the few pagoda masters, there were very few people in the Inhuman Domain who had directly come into contact with Kelowna Shinryu. Obviously, this included him, the legendary werewolf hero. Kuraloya was purely interested in this Eastern Evil Dragon that gave everyone a headache. He really wanted to know how powerful she was, so he could not help but speak carelessly. However, the Thunder Pagoda Master was someone who had seen it before. Yesterday, when his body was controlled by the former First Pagoda Master, he was brutally beaten up by Kelowna Shinryu. At this time, after listening to Kuraloya's tone, the Thunder Pagoda Master immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly pulled this warlike guy, who was about to be buried in the coffin, and warned him not to talk nonsense if he still wanted to live for a few more years, so that he could hug his grandson. Is she really that terrifying? Kuraloya could not help but be skeptical. In fact, his strength had reached a very high level, and he already felt that it was difficult to increase it anymore. He even felt that he was restricted by the shackles of the world level. The Thunder Pagoda Master said in a low voice, "I don't know if she's terrifying or not. Anyway, I can't fight back at all." Also, the First Pagoda Master said that if she really wants to destroy the Inhuman Domain, she can do it in less than half a day. Kuraloya was shocked at first, but he was not afraid. When he looked at Kelowna Shinryu from afar, he even revealed a blazing gaze. This kind of gaze was easily noticed by Kelowna Shinryu, who was thinking nonsense. Long Shirua felt hostility and subconsciously looked back. Her pupils instantly turned golden and looked at Kuraloya. With this glance, the legendary werewolf hero's heart seemed to stop. His breathing instantly quickened. "What the hell?" Long Shirua frowned. After a glance, she snorted and ignored him. She took Luo Dance's hand and walked in front. Later, the Thunder Pagoda Master patted Kuraloya's shoulder gently, which made this legendary hero come back to his senses. He muttered, "This even reminds me of the 2 terrifying guys we met in the final battle 100 years ago." At that time, the guards set by the former boss of the club were Kintaro and Eleanor. But this was just a small episode on the road. They were more concerned about whether the terror brought by them 100 years ago would really come again. They soon arrived at the entrance of the relics, but when they arrived, they didn't see Bailey, who was guarding here as Kuraloya said. But the entrance was opened at this moment, like a gap in another space. From here, they could see the corner of the battlefield covered by the boundary, and the gloomy streets inside. "What's the matter? Where's Bailey?" The Thunder Pagoda Master frowned and looked at Kuraloya. He shook his head. "How would I know? I'm not the bloodsucker's brother." But it seems that he didn't run in to investigate by himself, right? There seems to be a message left here. A deacon pointed at a stone slab next to him. There were words engraved on it. Apparently, the message was just written. It's really left by His Highness Bailey. He said that he encountered a strange situation, so he went in to have a look. Hui Yao thought for a while. This wasn't the inhuman domain, but the modern world. It was impossible for him to collect a lot of information as easily as in the inhuman domain. Let's go in and have a look. Everyone be careful and be prepared. According to Kuraloya, there will be many spirits of the dead warriors who died in the war. Thunder, prepare the magic protection of thunder and lightning for everyone. The Thunder Pagoda Master nodded and gave everyone a thunder protection that could restrain the spirits of the dead. However, when he also gave Kelowna Shinryu protection, it was slapped away by Long Shirua's hand. How could this thing be better than her Kelowna Shinryu's power to ward off evil spirits? In ancient times, even the Emperor of Shinryu had the protection of Shinryu's energy, so he was invulnerable to all evil spirits. Let alone her, a Shinryu from the land of Kelowna? In this regard, other than feeling depressed, the Thunder Pagoda Master had nothing to say. He couldn't afford to offend this crazy woman, so why couldn't he just hide from her? After a while, everyone was fully prepared and walked into the entrance. It was Long Shirua's first time coming to this place. Regarding the war 100 years ago, she had heard Hui Yao talk about it intermittently. However, the moment she stepped into this place, she did feel an aura of the same origin as the aura of Luochio and Miss Maid. Although it was very weak, it was so weak that it was just a faint aura that had remained for many years. It was said that during the war, many Black Soul envoys died here. Maybe it was the remains of these Black Soul envoys after they died? Long Shirua didn't know much about this. But this might be a good opportunity for her to understand the truth of the club from other places. In this situation where she bypassed Luochio and Miss Maid, whether she could see something that she hadn't noticed before. Because she knew one thing. That was Luochio took over the shop later. During the war 100 years ago, the owner of the shop wasn't Luochio. There seems to be the sound of fighting in front. Kuloya suddenly turned back at this time. I smell the smell of Baligan. Let's go. The owner of Hui Yao Tower said directly. No matter which one of them it was, their speed was naturally not much slower. Soon, they had found the place where the sound of fighting was coming from. It was a gladiator arena in ancient Pompeii City. After going through the audience seats, everyone saw that in the arena, the acting Grand Duke of the Torito clan, Baligan, was surrounded by hundreds of undead warriors at the center of the arena. Facing the siege of these undead warriors of the Allied forces, although Baligan's life was not in danger for a while, he was still struggling to cope with the enemy's fierce pursuit. The undead warriors seemed to have endless physical strength, and a normal strong person's physical strength would gradually be exhausted. At this moment, when everyone arrived, they saw that Baligan's face already showed a touch of fatigue. Tower Master Hui? The two deacons hurriedly asked at this time. Hui Yao pondered for a moment, and the wand in his hand had already been extended forward. A huge magic array instantly opened up in the sky above the arena. Then, a gust of wind was generated from the surroundings, instantly rolling up the sand that filled the sky, and rolled up the undead warriors in the arena into the air. Then, the tornado rolled back and had temporarily buried these undead warriors in the sand. Of course, such a blow could not destroy these undead warriors, but it could only temporarily hinder their movements. Seeing this, Baligan was able to escape. In an instant, he rushed out of the arena and came to the front of everyone. "Thank you for your help, Tower Master of Hui Yao Tower." Baligan immediately expressed his gratitude to the owner of Hui Yao Tower. Hui Yao, on the other hand, took a glance at Bailey before he suddenly asked, "These undead warriors don't seem to be weak at all. However, their movements are rather rigid. With your ability, you shouldn't be in such a sorry state." Why are you only defending and not attacking? This was also what Kaloya wanted to ask. He had fought with these undead warriors once, so he had a rough understanding of the power of these undead. If he really had to fight with them, he would not be in such a sorry state. Moreover, it was Baligan who he could not figure out the limits of his strength. The acting Grand Duke of the clan smiled bitterly and said, "Before I figure out whether these undead are the souls of the soldiers of the Allied forces, how can I casually deal with them?" Regardless of whether these words were sincere or not, at this moment, the words of the acting Grand Duke instantly made the Thunder Tower Master and the two deacons have a good impression of him. Even Kaloya looked at this old rival of his, and his gaze became more pleasing to the eye. Hui Yao simply nodded and muttered, "Baligan, I heard from Kaloya that you should stay behind to guard the entrance and prevent these undead from leaving the barrier. Why did you break in alone now? Did you discover something?" "That's right, I did find something." Baligan nodded. "At first, I was just monitoring the situation inside at the entrance, but I accidentally found an undead that looked very similar to the Mithril Tower Master. So, I had to investigate deeper." "What, you saw the Mithril Tower Master?" The Thunder Tower Master frowned, stepped forward, and asked again. Baligan nodded with a solemn expression. The Thunder Tower Master muttered, "I've checked the corpse of the Mithril Tower Master. His spiritual fire is completely gone. It seems that the undead you saw may really be the transformation of the Mithril Tower Master's lost spiritual fire. In this place, once the person dies, the spiritual fire will be deprived and he will become an undead warrior?" "I don't know." Baligan shook his head. "Thunder Tower Master, if what you said is true, then why didn't this change during the war? In fact, in the 100 years after the war, the undead have never appeared? The Magician Association should send someone to check this place every year." "That's right." The Thunder Tower Master nodded. "And it's the Mithril Tower Master who is in charge of this matter. Over the years, there has been nothing special here." "Baligan, where is the undead that looks like the Mithril Tower Master you saw now?" Hui Yao suddenly asked. Baligan stretched out his hand and pointed. "It leads to that place. I chased all the way and passed by this place. Unexpectedly, I was discovered by the undead warriors here, and was finally trapped. I remember this place. Back then, hundreds of our allied forces died in this arena. It was quite tragic." They looked up and saw that Baligan was pointing to a huge castle in the center of the ancient city. Chapter 1426. The Tower Master of Radiance did not immediately lead the team after seeing the undead that looked like the Mithril Tower Master walking into the huge castle, as Baligan mentioned. He first grabbed one of the undead warriors from the arena and began to study it with the Tower Master of Thunder and the other two deacons of the Secret Arts Tower. Naturally, Kuraloya did not have the technology in this area. He could only stand aside and stare. He even pulled Baligan aside and told him that the acting Grand Duke's territory had been overthrown. This was the first time Kuraloya saw such a wonderful expression on Baligan's face. "Are you sure you're not joking?" Baligan asked in a deep voice. This was also the first time Kuraloya saw Baligan with such a solemn expression. The joke made because they were old enemies stopped here. Kuraloya nodded and said, "This is what the Tower Master of Radiance said personally. How likely do you think it is to be a joke? So, do you plan to go back now?" Baligan frowned but did not say anything. Kuraloya himself was also the lord of a werewolf territory. Of course, he knew that if his territory encountered the same situation, it would definitely explode on the spot. This vampire was really good at keeping his composure. "Let's talk about it again when the matter here is over." After a while, Baligan seemed to have made a decision and slowly sighed. "If the horror of 100 years ago comes again, we can't be spared. When facing them, all the contradictions can be put aside." Kuraloya just shrugged and said indifferently, "If I hadn't known you for more than 200 years, I would have almost believed it." Baligan just pretended not to hear it and then said indifferently, "Except for the 2 tower masters and the deacons of the association, what is the origin of the other 2? I have a very strange impression of them." "Do you want to know?" Kuraloya asked in a serious manner. Baligan was silent for a moment and finally nodded. The legendary old werewolf hero leaned over with a cautious look. Finally, he said softly, "Ask her yourself. You didn't die here in the war. It is indeed the greatest injustice to those who died in the war," Baligan responded with a blank expression. Then, the old werewolf hero laughed. At this moment, Hui Yao and the others had already gained a little understanding of the undead creature's research. He called everyone who was scattered around. After that, he waved his hand and pressed the undead warriors that he had captured onto the ground so that they would not be able to move. What's the result? Kaloya poked his head forward and stared curiously. Initial confirmation is that these specters aren't the main bodies, the Radiance Tower Master said with a stern expression. However, they are indeed the heroic souls of the warriors who died in battle. No. Again? What do you mean? Kaloya immediately scratched his head. The Radiance Tower Master said, "To put it simply, this undead, and even the other undead here, are very likely to have been replicated through some sort of method. They exist as clones." "Copy?" Kaloya immediately frowned. "What method can copy undead? Radiance Pagoda Master, you have to understand that these fellows are generally not weak. Are you sure you have a way to replicate all of them? Their methods are unknown, but if they have 100 years to focus on this aspect, perhaps someone will be able to do it," the Radiance Tower Master said seriously. "Besides, even if we don't have such methods, it doesn't mean that they don't." It was as if any inconceivable matter could be convinced as long as they were the reason. Even if the few here were already the best of the best amongst the Inhumans, they themselves were an inconceivable amalgamation. "So," Kaloya slapped his head at this time. "Radiance Tower Master, do you mean that you also think that they have indeed returned and are even plotting something? Everything here is just the beginning?" The Radiance Tower Master shook his head. "I'm not sure yet, but perhaps we can get the answer after exploring the castle." His expression began to become more dignified at this time. "However, I can't even be sure what kind of dangers we will encounter in the castle. I can't even guarantee your safety, so I don't recommend that everyone enter the castle to explore. Thunder, you take some people and stay at the entrance to prevent the undead from breaking out. Kaloya and Baligan, follow me into the castle. You have attacked the castle before, so you should be more familiar with the terrain." The 2 former legendary heroes who were named nodded. After saying that, the Radiance Tower Master looked at Long Shirao with a hint of inquiry. He could not make decisions for this Shinryu, so he could only rely on her own opinion. Long Shirao said without thinking, "Don't worry about me, I can take care of myself." The Radiance Tower Master nodded. "Well then, let's not delay any further. Let's set off immediately." The Modern Realm. The car slowly stopped in front of the gate of the suburban manor. Jin Zhongyuan's task as a guide was considered completed. It had to be said that the guide chosen by Peter Chan was indeed very sensible. After arriving at the destination, Jin Zhongyuan did not even have the intention to stay. He looked as if he did not intend to get any tips from Boss Luo. His sincerity was enough to make a good impression on Jin Zhongyuan. "Then, I'll take my leave." Jin Zhongyuan gave out his card before getting into the car and smiled politely. "Other than Losi, I'm quite familiar with this place. If you need anything in the future, you're welcome to find me. After all, I'll only be here for an hour at most." "If there's a chance." Boss Luo nodded. Jin Zhongyuan did not stay any longer and directly drove away. After the car left the vicinity of the manor, the front gate of the manor slowly opened. The moment the door was opened, a figure gradually turned from an illusion to a real figure in front of the gate, wearing a gray scarf, Taisetsu. "Are you used to living here?" Luochio casually greeted. Boss, Yu Yi. Taisetsu slightly nodded, then came over to pick up the luggage and said calmly, "The environment here is not bad. The residents of the town in front are also quite friendly. It's okay to live here for a short period of time." Taisetsu obviously did not intend to live here for a long time, if there were no instructions. It's more convenient to live here for the time being. Luochio smiled casually, "Let's go in first." Taisetsu knew what the boss meant by more convenient. In fact, for his boss, no matter where, what was inconvenient? But some people would inevitably care. Taisetsu couldn't say anything, just nodded silently. It was Luochio who gave him a new life, and it was also Luochio who gave him a chance to make up for the past, so now his thoughts were very simple. Just follow this guy. Behind Luochio. Speaking of which, where's Nero? Miss Maid asked with a slight smile. I don't seem to see her. She went to town to buy some ingredient. Taisetsu said casually. Knowing that Miss Yu is coming, she took the initiative to add some ingredients for you when she saw that the ingredients in the kitchen were not enough. Miss Maid chuckled. Is it really like this? Of course. Taisetsu nodded, looking forward without any abnormality on his face. Miss Maid's smile gradually deepened. She turned her eyes to her master and said softly, "Before coming here, I was worried about whether you two would get along well. Now it seems that you two get along well. We all work for the boss. How can we have any conflicts?" Taisetsu said indifferently, "You worry too much. Taisetsu is really reliable." Miss Maid smiled slightly. "Is there anything you want to eat tonight? I'm very interested in cooking today." "Well, how about a small fry emperor?" Taisetsu was not pretentious. "Of course. Later." Miss Maid was able to manage the Black Soul envoys very well. Luochio basically never worried about the Black Soul envoys. At this time, he did not intend to intervene in this kind of internal affairs. When the door of the house opened, Luochio suddenly waved his hand. Beside him, streams of light appeared like spirals and then gathered. Then, Luoya, who was as delicate as a doll, appeared here, holding a living pillow with both hands. Luoya slowly opened her eyes and looked at the house in front of her. At the same time, she naturally reached out to grab Luochio's hand. "You've worked hard these days." Luochio knew that she could only wake up for a limited time every day. At this time, he squatted down and stroked her head. "From now on, you can stay here with me. You don't have to stay in the shop anymore. When you wake up, you can walk outside freely. I'll let Taisetsu or Nero take care of you." This was something that Luochio had thought about before arriving in Britain. The reason for leaving China at first was actually not related to Luoya, but now, he could incorporate Luoya's existence into it. However, Luoya did not show much willingness to go out at this time. Instead, she grabbed Boss Luo's hand more tightly. He patted the child's cheek, then turned back and said, "Yu Yi, take Luoya to choose a room she likes. My room is the same." "Boss, are you going out?" Taisetsu immediately guessed something. Luochio nodded and said, "I'll walk around the town and see if there's a suitable place to settle the shop." Unlike the previous boss Luo, who had always lived in the shop, the current boss Luo seemed to be more inclined to take care of the shop as a job. Since it was a job, there was a time to go to work and get off work. He would set a time for himself to go to work and leave every day. It was the same in the past, and he did not intend to change now. "Then I'll accompany you." Taisetsu nodded and volunteered. He knew that Miss Maid still had to take care of Luoya, so she naturally could not leave for the time being, and of course, it was best to have someone who could be ordered around the boss. "No, I'll walk around by myself." Luochio waved his hand. "Go and help Yu Yi if she needs to do anything." "Understood." Taisetsu nodded. He did not insist. Naturally, it was much better than a certain old Taoist black soul who only knew how to flatter. Boss Luo was the kind of person who left whenever he wanted. After he went out temporarily, Miss Maid, who was very efficient, quickly found a room for Luoya that she liked. It was a room without a terrace, and on the contrary, it was not very spacious, the attic on the east side of the manor. But the ceiling here could be opened, and the Milky Way could be seen in the clear night. Luo Yi did not even have many requests, but Miss Maid took the initiative to add a delicate dressing table here. As for the sleeping place, as the pillow of Xing creation creatures, Mian could solve the problem very well. As long as she grew bigger, it would be a perfect bed that no mattress could compare to. At this time, Miss Maid was in front of the dressing table, combing Luo Yi's hair. This was Luo Yi's openness to outsiders. In the beginning, only Boss Luo was allowed to touch her, but now, she allowed Miss Maid to do some slightly intimate things. But she still did not say anything to anyone except Luoqiu. But Mian could. The time of being sleepy seems to have decreased. Miss Maid patiently combed Luo Yi's hair, which was not worse than hers, and seemed to enjoy it. The smile on her face became softer and softer. At this time, Luo Yi raised her head and looked at Yu Yi. She blinked and then nodded gently. Then she looked at herself in the mirror expressionlessly. At this time, Miss Maid's hand suddenly stopped. This made Luo Yi curious, and she looked at her curiously. Miss Maid smiled and said, "Well, it's a gadget I made in the past. It seems that a naughty guy broke in." Luo Yi tilted her head. She could understand, but she did not understand. Miss Maid waved her hand casually. On the table next to her, lines began to gradually appear in a three-dimensional manner, and finally built a three-dimensional model of a castle about 1 meter high. It was dark gray and all the structures inside could be seen, just like transparent building blocks. Luo Yi seemed to be quite interested. She stood up from the stool and walked to the table. She blinked and approached the castle model. She observed it with great interest, occasionally looking back at Miss Maid. "I made it in the past, and it's been there for a long time." Yu Yi smiled and said. Luo Yi blinked again, and suddenly reached out to the castle. She tentatively pulled out a part in front of the castle gate with her fingers. Because of mechanics, this part suddenly scattered. Luo Yi was suddenly at a loss and froze on the spot. "It doesn't matter, just put them back." Miss Maid squinted and smiled. "Even if you don't put them back, they will recover after a while." Luo Yi blinked and picked up a fallen part. After thinking for a while, she put it on the collapsed place. She seemed to have found something interesting, and her interest was really aroused. Miss Maid did not speak, but silently accompanied her, showing a beautiful smile from time to time. "Is this the castle where the battle took place?" Standing in front of the huge castle gate, the Shinryu of Kelowna looked up. This place was even much bigger than the Xianyuan Palace. "Hey, Sister Long, what's that?" The little butterfly monster pointed up at this time. Above the sky, a pile of small black spots gradually fell, faster and faster, faster and faster, F***CK. Falling rocks. Dodge. Rumble. Chapter 14:27. Each of the bricks was at least 10 meters long. The moment they fell, it felt like a huge mountain was collapsing. Of course, such a huge falling stone was not a hopeless situation for the Kelowna Shinryu or for the Radiance Tower Master and the others. The Radiance Tower Master waved his magic staff to activate a layer of enchantment and easily block these huge bricks. But the question was, why did the castle collapse at this time? This castle had been taken over by the Magician Association since the war 100 years ago. In the past 100 years, the castle had been very peaceful and had never collapsed. However, when they thought of the undead warriors outside, they seemed to be able to explain the abnormality of the castle in some way. "These bricks can't be to welcome us, right?" Long Shiro frowned. After all the huge bricks fell, she casually jumped on one of them and looked up. She squatted down and reached out to tap the material of the brick under her feet, only to find that it was very hard. Even as the true dragon of the divine land, she needed to use a little bit of strength to pinch this thing. Her little bit of strength was enough to directly crush the diamond jade into pieces. While she was thinking, the stone under the Kelowna Shinryu's feet suddenly flew up automatically, At a terrifying speed, it suddenly rose into the sky. Damn! What's happening now? Long Shirua looked down in confusion and saw that the huge bricks that fell just now were flying back one by one. She only felt a huge black shadow appear above her head. When she looked up, she saw a huge brick directly pressing down on her. She subconsciously jumped to another place, and then another huge brick pressed down 4 times in a row. Kelowna Shinryu, who was a little angry, snorted coldly and directly punched the 5th huge brick that was about to press down on her. She was like a spring that had been charged to the limit, and her whole body shot straight up into the sky. Unexpectedly, the 5th huge stone brick was forcibly moved away at this moment, and then like a beautiful Tetris, it was directly inserted into another place. Kelowna Shinryu, who was soaring into the sky, really soared into the sky. F***ck, so cheap! When one of the parts of the castle in her hand was turned and then inserted into another place, Loya looked outside at the part that she had cut back. It looked a little different from before. She couldn't help but show a trace of panic and timidity, looking up at the servant girl pitifully. The servant girl was naturally very gentle at this time. She gently patted Loya's shoulder to show encouragement and then said softly, "It's okay, if you are not satisfied with it, you can push it all away and then cut it in the way you want." Loya blinked her eyes. During this period of time, this big sister of hers had been very good to her. As if she understood the meaning in Loya's eyes, the servant girl smiled and said, "This is not something important, just a toy. If Luoya liked it, she could take it apart and reassemble it, because when she was making it, she had considered the possibility of completing different combinations. So, you can just use these parts in the way you like." As if she felt the servant girl's encouragement and support, Loya nodded at this time. She looked again at the part of the castle that she had accidentally cut. After thinking for a while, she directly stretched out her hands. Push pa la la la. Like a stack of Lego blocks being pushed, a large area in front of the castle model was instantly scattered. Kelowna Shinryu, who didn't hit anything after spiraling into the sky, fell to the ground very gloomily. The little butterfly monster and the Radiance Tower Master, who were scattered around, quickly found her. "Old Miss Long, are you okay?" the Radiance Tower Master asked with concern. The true dragon of the Divine Land shook his head, then stretched his neck and said, "It's nothing. I just don't know why, but I've been feeling very disgusted since just now. It's like I'm disgusted by someone. It's giving me goosebumps all over." The Radiance Tower Master nodded at this time with a heavy expression. This castle is indeed a bit strange. Looking at the appearance of these huge bricks, they seem to be alive. Everyone, be careful, there may be more dangers inside. Then hurry up and go in. It's fine if only a few things fall, but if all of them fall, it won't be fun, Kaloya said casually. The castle door was open, so they could easily see it. But at this time, as if to prove this legendary old werewolf hero's guess, hundreds and thousands of huge bricks fell from the sky in an instant. At this moment, it was as if the earth had welcomed a group of burning meteorites that cut through the atmosphere from above the stars. Hurry! Hurry up and go in. At this moment, even the first Tower Master, Hui Yao, found it difficult to maintain his composure. He shouted loudly and waved his wand. A light shield enveloped him, Baligan, and Kuraloya at the same time. Then, he floated up and rushed into the castle gate. As for Long Shirua, after she raised her finger to greet these huge falling stones, she grabbed the back of the little butterfly's collar with one hand and followed closely behind Hui Yao, successfully entering the castle door. Pa la la la. Little Luo bent down and picked up a piece of the castle model that had fallen to the ground because she had pushed it away. Then, she approached it and looked at it in front of her eyes. The part was almost transparent. It was a gray crystal-like thing. Her eyes seemed to be refracted by a Mitsubishi mirror, and became round all of a sudden. The servant girl smiled at this time and said, "Miss Luo, I'll prepare afternoon tea for you. It's rare that you're not sleepy today." During this period, if you feel bored, you can play with this model. Don't worry about breaking it, it's quite sturdy. Luo Ye nodded silently, then she turned around and looked at the castle model parts scattered on the table. She picked up a part and began to think. With a faint smile on her face, the servant girl slowly retreated from the attic. Since it was to prepare afternoon tea, it naturally had to be more exquisite. Therefore, it was necessary to spend a little more time because Miss Luo Ye was. Master personally recognized her as his sister. As a qualified servant girl, this was self-cultivation. What's that sound? At the entrance of the barrier, the Thunder Tower Master and the two deacons who were guarding the inner area of the ancient city could not help but feel shocked after feeling the tremor of the earth at this time. It seems to have stopped. The Thunder Tower Master frowned, but I didn't receive a message from the Radiance Tower Master. They should be fine, maybe they just found something. The two deacons were naturally led by the Thunder Tower Master. At this time, they directly nodded, and their expressions were much calmer. The two deacons had only been in this position for a short time, and they were promoted after the Great Battle 100 years ago. Regarding the Great Battle 100 years ago, they had only seen some records of that year in the internal library of the association's headquarters. Now that they had a rare opportunity, they could not help but ask curiously. Thunder Tower Master, I've read some documents before. According to the records, they are in existence more terrifying than demons. In the end, what is so terrifying about they? Why would they be attacked by the entire inhuman domain? After a moment of silence, the Thunder Tower Master said, "You know about Yari's previous invasion, right?" Of course they knew, even clearly, because this happened 2 days ago. It was even the most terrifying disaster they had encountered since joining the association and becoming deacons. The Thunder Tower Master sighed and said, "At that time, Yari's was still the previous first Tower Master of the association, and he was supported by everyone. But I don't know when it started, but after coming into contact with, Yari seemed to have changed into a different person. Not only did he secretly conduct many forbidden experiments, but in order to obtain enough souls as bargaining chips to make a deal with he did not hesitate to start a war between countries in the modern world. In the end, the unsatisfied Yaris even planned to offer up the souls of his wife and daughter." The two deacons were now drenched in cold sweat as they listened. The Thunder Tower Master, on the other hand, was dispirited. "Actually, it's not just Yaris. Some of us have also secretly made deals with they behind their backs. Can you imagine, when a country's entire governing body, from top to bottom, is corrupted and becomes an activity that exists with the flow of blood, what kind of situation would that country be in? Then, that country is not far from destruction," the deacons said softly. "That's right, it's not far from destruction." The Thunder Tower Master nodded. Fortunately, when the Radiance Tower Master returned from his travels in the East, he had a premonition that in the long run, non-humans would usher in the most terrifying destruction. This kind of deal itself is like the devil's temptation. Although it can continuously satisfy individuals, it is also like a bottomless abyss. One day, when we are unable to satisfy its needs, it will definitely devour us. So that was the reason for the Great War 100 years ago. The deacons were suddenly enlightened. If that's the case. But according to the documents, the various clans participated in the alliance back then, and there were heavy casualties. Then why didn't the Radiance Tower Master, the Scarlet Flame Tower Master, or even the Beast King, or the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans participate in the war? Do you think that if our strongest group of people had also participated in the battle, the casualties of the Allied forces would not have been so tragic? The Thunder Tower Master said indifferently, "You even included me in your calculations, but you were just too embarrassed to say it in front of me, right?" They could only laugh awkwardly and bitterly. The Thunder Tower Master sighed and said, "It's not that we didn't want to participate in the war. It's that we had no way to participate. The two deacons were immediately puzzled. The Thunder Pagoda Master explained, "I just said that every department in this country, from top to bottom, has already fallen into this whirlpool. Although the coalition army was successfully formed through the efforts of the Radiance Pagoda Master, those who are secretly against it, those fellows who are unwilling to extricate themselves from the whirlpool obviously do not wish to see this shortcut destroyed." "You mean?" The deacons were shocked. "During the Great War back then, there were actually two factions? We needed to leave behind the highest combat power to restrict those who opposed us." The Thunder Tower Master smiled bitterly. "Isn't it ironic? Our own higher-ups actually helped the enemy to deal with our own people. Do you think that the Radiance Pagoda Master is willing to see such a young life with great potential die in vain? Back then, he had no other choice but to do so. In order to allow the alliance to set off smoothly, the Radiance Tower Master forcefully suppressed the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans, as well as 6 of the top 10 most wanted criminals in the inhuman domain back then. He couldn't free himself at all. As for us, we all had our own missions." The two deacons instantly fell silent. They were young and didn't know that there was such an inside story back then. At this moment they only felt rather complicated. After the war, the Alliance won a Pyrrhic victory. The Thunder Tower Master shook his head. "As for those who opposed us back then, naturally they also failed. Many of them were directly shut down. This was the origin of the associations, 0° Hell. As for those like the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans, because it involved an entire clan, the Radiance Tower Master could only give them some punishment in consideration of the stability of the inhuman domain. From then on, the 13 clans could only restrain the vampires and couldn't casually hunt humans in the modern world. As compensation, the Tower Master also agreed to move the large clans, farms, in the modern world to the inhuman domain for free. Otherwise, with the cost of living in the inhuman domain, the 13 clans wouldn't even be able to afford it even if they sold themselves. Yes, it's our fortune to have a Radiance Tower Master in the association." The Thunder Tower Master shook his head and said in a voice that only he could hear, "Fortune? Perhaps, but actually we are even dragging him down. Otherwise, with his talent, he might have been able to take the last step." "The last step?" The Thunder Tower Master muttered to himself, "The ultimate of magic. Seeing God. The ultimate of magic. Seeing God?" The deacons felt as if they had opened a new door today. Immediately, they looked at the oldest Tower Master with fervent gazes, hoping that he could say more. However, the Thunder Tower Master shook his head. "You are still improving and haven't reached the limit. Even if I tell you now, you won't understand. Let's finish our current path first." The Radiance Tower Master said that biting off more than one can chew is not good. Remember not to be impatient for result. Everything must be done step by step. Haste makes waste. The Radiance Tower Master is indeed a wise man, a wise man. We will definitely remember this. Suddenly fog appeared. Chapter 1428. No one knew when it started, but a thin layer of fog started to appear on the streets of the ancient city. Very soon, the Thunder Tower Master felt that something was wrong. This place was shrouded by the association's barrier. Although it didn't isolate all conditions related to temperature, the sudden appearance of fog was clearly unreasonable. "Look, there's something approaching from the fog." At this moment, a deacon pointed in a certain direction in the fog. They all looked over and saw a figure slowly walking over from the gradually thickening fog. "It might be the undead here. Be careful." The Thunder Tower Master frowned. He was left here mainly to prevent these undead from rushing out of the barrier and wandering into the main world. "It doesn't seem to be." The deacon who discovered it first opened his palm, and a ray of light shone over. The newcomer's footsteps were unsteady, and it seemed to be moving with great difficulty. It gradually became clearer, and soon became visible under the direct illumination of the light source. "It's Lord Curaloya." The Kuraloya in front of them seemed to be seriously injured. He covered his shoulder with one hand as if he would collapse at any moment. There were many wounds on his body that kept bleeding. At this moment, Kuraloya raised his head with difficulty. His lips moved slightly as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Kuraloya finally fell to the ground. The Thunder Tower Master was shocked but didn't act immediately. He only frowned. A deacon beside him had already rushed over to Kuraloya's side. "Lord Kuraloya, what happened to you? What happened? Where's our Tower Master?" The deacon hurriedly helped Kuraloya up from the ground and shook his body, but at this moment, Kuraloya's eyes were tightly shut and he didn't move at all. The deacon's expression immediately became heavy. He helped Kuraloya up and walked back. However, when he looked at the Thunder Tower Master and the other deacon, he discovered a trace of fear in their eyes. "Be careful." He couldn't help but subconsciously shudder. In that instant, something had pierced through his back. It was a sharp black dagger. At this moment, the lightning in the Thunder Pagoda Master's palm was already surging, but in the end, he was still a step too slow. The deacon, whose body was pierced by the black sword, finally understood what was going on. He struggled to push away Kuraloya, who was beside him, and with a furious roar, he slapped Kuraloya fiercely with his palm. Flames suddenly appeared at the point of contact, followed by a violent explosion. The air current completely separated them. The deacon in his hand was sent flying towards the Thunder Tower Master by the air current, while the other deacon quickly reached out and caught him. That Kuraloya, who had been bounced off by the explosion, fell to the ground on the other side. But this Kuraloya's body gradually began to melt, and in the end, turned into a pile of black dust. "What's wrong with him?" The Thunder Pagoda Master hastily erected a wall of electricity around him and anxiously asked. "Already dead." The Thunder Tower Master clenched his teeth as he looked at the deacon who had fallen into his companion's arms. His eyes filled with fear and anger. He quickly recognized a bottle of medicine and blurted out, "Stabilize his spiritual flame. It shouldn't be extinguished yet. And no, I can't feel it, it disappeared. His spiritual flame has disappeared." "What?" The Thunder Pagoda Master was both shocked and angry. But at this moment, his eyebrows suddenly jumped and he loudly shouted, "Dodge!" The Thunder Pagoda Master stretched out his finger and a bolt of electricity shot out from his fingertip. This deacon reacted quickly and instinctively lowered his head. The lightning narrowly brushed past his head and struck his back. There seemed to be something behind him. This deacon looked back in fear, only to see a gray figure standing behind him at an unknown time. And this figure was actually his companion who had already died in his arms. His companion had actually turned into something similar to those undead in the ancient city. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the Thunder Pagoda Master once again acted, directly destroying the undead that the dead deacon had turned into. Then, he retracted the wall of electricity, protecting himself and the remaining deacon, but the corpse of the dead deacon could only be isolated outside the wall of electricity. In the end, what happened? Why did it happen in such a short time? It seems. The Thunder Pagoda Master's expression was ugly. In this place, once someone dies, they will be transformed. Then, the remaining deacon was shocked. He thought of that Kuraloya who had attacked just now. Does that mean that the Radiance Pagoda Master and the others have already encountered danger? The Thunder Pagoda Master was silent, because at this moment, he realized that he had already lost any means of contacting the Radiance Pagoda Master. There was a thick fog here, which actually blocked all effective communication. "Pagoda Master, we are now," the Thunder Pagoda Master lowered his head and muttered to himself. Then, he quickly said, "Take my token back to the headquarters and tell the Scarlet Blaze Pagoda Master and the others. They will know what to do." "You!" the Thunder Pagoda Master sternly said, "I will wait for them here." "Okay." The deacon did not dare to hesitate. He only glanced at the corpse of his dead companion. After hesitating for a while, he rushed out of the entrance of the barrier and rushed to the coordinates, returning to the inhuman domain. In the ancient city inside the castle, Kelowna's Shinryu did not seem to be in a difficult situation at this time. However, her patience was gradually worn out to a certain extent, because she was separated from the Radiance Pagoda Master and the others. In this inconceivably huge castle, Long Shirua led Luo Dance all the way forward. They did not encounter any enemies. Instead, they encountered the terrifying mechanisms of this castle. As they walked, the interior of the castle suddenly began to collapse. As they walked, the walls, ceiling and even the ground of the castle suddenly began to move. They rotated, turned upside down and even folded. It was impossible to guard against, and there was no sign at all. It was like walking into a constantly moving and reassembling labyrinth. There was no pattern at all. Long Shirua even made herself not touch anything. However, she still could not guard against the strange changes of this castle. Moreover, there was an extremely strong ability to isolate the breath. Kelowna's Shinryu could not even use her spiritual mind to search for the traces of Hui Yao and the others. Moreover, because of the constant changes inside the castle, she was not even sure where she was now. Not only that, Long Shirua also felt that her strength was also depleting quickly. Even if she stood still, her physical strength would be consumed at an incredible speed. Kelowna's Shinryu, who could not replenish her strength, gradually felt a little bit of pressure. On the contrary, the little butterfly monster did not feel the same. Her movements were very normal. It seemed that the stronger the strength, the stronger the suppression, and so on. Kelowna's Shinryu thought to herself, should I pay the previous bill and continue to use the intelligence channel? But if I draw out the essence blood in this place, Sister Long, it seems to have stopped, the little butterfly monster said quickly at this time. Before this, they were hiding in a small empty room that they found on the road. There was nothing in this small room, but it was constantly moving. Until now, the movement had stopped. Long Shirua frowned, tentatively walked to the door of the room and opened it. But the moment the door was opened, she was faced with a sealed wall. The only entrance and exit of this room was inexplicably blocked. Who the hell designed this castle? At this time, the room shook violently again. The shaking was as if the whole world was turning over, turning upside down, rotating and shaking. She used Shinryu's power to protect herself and Luo Dance at the same time. At this time, they were like rubber balls, bouncing around in this room, bouncing around, bouncing around, bouncing around, bouncing around. What the hell? Is there an end to this? Kelowna's Shinryu even felt that her stomach began to surge. It was about the size of a sugar cube, and now it was in Luo Ya's hand. She stopped shaking this small cube in her hand, and then approached her eyes. She felt like she saw something inside, but suddenly, she didn't seem to see anything. Sensing the strangeness, Loya instinctively continued to shake the small cube. After shaking it back and forth a few times, she felt like she didn't see anything. Luo Ya tilted her head, and soon shifted her attention from this cube to another place, the model of the castle. After a few reconstructions, the originally Romanesque-style castle had become a pile of messy brick. Little Master is so awesome. Even so, Soft, the Xing creation creature who accompanied her, praised at this time. It even said very cleverly, if Master sees this, he will definitely praise you. Really? Luo Ya asked softly. Of course. Regardless of whether it was true or not, this was the right time. As a Xing creation creature who was entrusted with the task of accompanying Luo Ya, how to make this little master happy was something this Xing creation creature thought about almost every day. Ah yes. At this time, Soft suddenly expanded itself. Its skin even began to bulge at this time, and the bulge even became three-dimensional, and then it turned into the appearance of an ancient Chinese palace building. Xing creation creature had the memory of before it was given life. This Xing creation creature had stayed in Luochio's house for several years before it became Xing creation creature. I remember that master used to like to watch some scenery movies. Little master. Mian Mian said seriously, "Oh right, there's this too." The surface bulged again, and next to the palace, a small pyramid stood up. Looking at the building that Soft made based on its memory, Luo Yi blinked, and then looked at the pile of indescribable things that she made, and after thinking for a moment, she stretched out her small hand, expressionlessly, and pushed pack. Crash. The parts scattered again. Luo Yi began to pile them up again. Under the attic window, Taisetsu just got a water pipe, and then sprinkled water on the grass in the back garden. In the kitchen not far away, Miss Maid's figure could be seen occasionally, and the smell of baked biscuits was very pleasant. Taisetsu looked up at the sun in the sky, yawned, and said lazily, "Peaceful days are really good." The school was a place where one could see the sea. After leaving the manor, Boss Luo casually walked on the edge of the coastline for a while, and then began to walk to the town outside the school. A place full of tranquility, this was Boss Luo's impression so far. Even if the students in the school were included, there would not be many people here, and naturally there would not be too many shops. After all, the market of the town was only so big, if there were more shops, it would not be able to accommodate them. If the club was placed in such a place, the chances of attracting customers on weekdays would naturally be greatly reduced. If it weren't for the other projects that could continuously and steadily increase his income, Boss Luo himself would have to consider whether it was appropriate to set up a store here because of his usual extravagance. He had actually found a few places that he liked and could set up the shop, but there was no place for the time being that could really be decided. It might be a good thing to have a choice, but the most terrible thing was that he didn't even have the chance to choose, or he had lost the idea of choosing. He stopped at a place like a small park at the corner of the street. Boss Luo felt Nero here, and it was easy to find her in this place. On a tree. On the branch, there were 2 shopping bags full of things hanging at this time. Nero was lying on the branch at this time, resting her head on her hands, chewing gum, and blowing a big bubble from time to time. Obviously, she was very comfortable. The reason why she didn't notice Boss Luo's arrival was, Luochio didn't intend to let Nero notice his arrival immediately. At this time, several children were playing under the tree. In the eyes of some adults, maybe it was just children playing, if they didn't see some bullying. The little boy who was being bullied looked to be only 5 or 6 years old. He had a head of thick brown hair. He was being teased by several older children. The balloon in the little boy's hand was taken away. He was so short that he couldn't get his things back from the taller children. Nero on the tree was obviously not interested in this scene. She even yawned out of boredom. Until the balloon that was taken away flew to the tree because the older child didn't hold it firmly, it gently hit her hanging leg. The black soul envoy lying on the tree looked down. The children subconsciously looked up at the balloon that flew to the branch and then got stuck. They didn't see anything at first, but suddenly, a beautiful elder sister with short white hair appeared on the branch. The children were all stunned. Even the little boy who had his balloon snatched away was dumbfounded at this moment. Suddenly, this good-looking big sister with short white hair suddenly turned into an old woman with pus oozing out of her mouth. Her eyeballs even fell out of her head. Wow! The children suddenly fell to the ground, and then screamed and ran away from this place. Nero on the tree gave a very happy laugh at this time. She took out an apple from the shopping bag and ate it. Nero returned to her original appearance, looking down at the tree again, and said casually, "Kid, are you not afraid?" Balloon. The little boy resisted the panic and looked at Nero bravely. Nero tilted her head and looked at the balloon that could be stuck next to her. Suddenly, a bitch's smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She took another bite of the apple and bit the core. Then, she spat out the core of the apple. Bang! The balloon was shot by the core of the apple, and the broken balloon and the string fell down. There seemed to be something tied to the string, like a small piece of paper. The little boy's eyes suddenly turned red, but he didn't say anything, just silently picked up the thing, wiped his eyes, and slowly left this place. Nero on the tree looked sideways, and took another bite of the apple. It seemed to be sour. Chapter 14:29. When Boss Luo was about to show up, Nero suddenly jumped down from the tree with a shopping bag. Luocio stopped. Nero began to walk towards the direction of the leaving child, seemingly intending to follow him. After Nero walked out of the small park, he came to the tree and looked around. Then he closed his eyes, and his vision was reconstructed in a three-dimensional way in his mind. Boss Luo found something. He opened his eyes and moved slightly. In the next moment, he had already appeared on the top of a slightly higher building in the town. On a sign sticking out from the roof of the building, a hooked balloon was swinging with the wind. The balloon was obviously much smaller than its original size. It seemed that it had been hooked here for some time. Maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before. The thin string wrapped around the pole of the sign began to unravel automatically, and the free balloon finally fell into Boss Luo's hand. He tore off the small note tied to the end of the thin string and opened it to take a look. "I don't want to die." The sea breeze blew, and suddenly, the small note was blown away from Luocio's hand away. Mr. Smith was the chef and owner of a restaurant in the town. He had a beautiful wife and a 5-year-old child, Joe. The restaurant's business had always been good. Although he was busy with work, Mr. Smith's life was full and happy, because this family would welcome a new baby this year. Because Mr. Smith's wife, Deborah, was 8 months pregnant and was about to give birth. Whether it was the neighbors or the regular customers of the restaurant, they were sincerely happy for this upcoming baby. After the new year, in order to take care of Deborah, who was pregnant for the second time, Mr. Smith's mother temporarily came here from her hometown. This indeed made Mr. Smith much more relaxed. Outside the restaurant, today's menu was written on a small blackboard. A regular customer was looking at the menu and thinking. At this moment, a 5-year-old boy walked over with his head down. "Hey Joe, are you okay?" The customer stopped the little boy who was about to walk into the restaurant with his head down. The little boy just nodded, but there was no smile on his face. It was too easy for adults to grasp a child's unhappy mood. The customer looked at the dirt on Joe and seemed to know something. He took out a tissue and wiped Joe's slightly dirty face and clothes. "Joe, were you bullied?" "Little boy." Joe still shook his head. "But I see you're unhappy, Joe." The customer put his hands on Joe's shoulders. "Son, if you don't tell the truth, you may become a dishonest child and you will be punished. Your nose will become very long and it will hit the ceiling, so you will be very painful. You will even end up like Pinocchio." Joe was silent for a long time, and suddenly said something that surprised the old customer. "If I become Pinocchio, I won't die?" The old customer was stunned. Then, he looked at the child strangely and frowned. "Joe, do you know what you're saying?" Joe nodded. "Pinocchio didn't die. He didn't die in the end in the story." The old customer thought for a while. "Son, why do you feel like you will die?" Joe said with a look of fear, "Because I saw Mr. Death. My grandma said that death will take away life. It will take me away." The old customer opened his mouth, thought for a while, and walked directly into the restaurant with Joe. The staff naturally recognized Joe, the boss's child, and immediately greeted him to the counter to take care of him. The old customer found Mr. Smith, who was busy in the kitchen, and told him about Joe. Mr. Smith, who had recently put on weight, listened to the old customer's description very patiently. After thinking about it, he said, "Oh, old George, thank you for telling me about Joe. Please forgive me for being too busy. Maybe if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't even know about Joe. He may just feel uneasy." Customer. Old George patted Mr. Smith's shoulder comfortingly at this time. "Maybe because Deborah is about to give birth, you all ignored Joe's feelings. Smith, children at this age are very sensitive and fragile. When the lunch market is over, I will have a good talk with Joe," Mr. Smith promised. "I know you will be a good father." Old George smiled. "Then today's lunch will be the signature roast duck breast set. I'm really hungry." "As you wish, sir." Mr. Smith put on the chef's hat again and walked into the kitchen. There were not many customers at noon today, and Mr. Smith soon had some free time. He walked up to Joe with a bowl of mushroom soup that he had made himself. He looked at Joe's dirty clothes, patted them carefully a few times, and suddenly said, "Joe, do you have anything to say to me?" Joe drank the mushroom soup silently, pursing his lips from time to time. Mr. Smith suddenly felt guilty. Maybe he really neglected the child's feelings during this time. His family was busy and happy with his wife's upcoming birth, and gradually did not pay so much attention to Joe's affairs. So, Mr. Smith picked up Joe and put him on his lap. He wiped the soup stain on Joe's mouth and smiled. "Joe, when summer vacation comes, I will go to sea with you, just like we did last year." When summer vacation came, his wife Deborah would successfully give birth to the second child, and he would have more free time. Indeed, he could spend more time with his eldest son. "Really?" Joe seemed to be in high spirits. Mr. Smith held out his hand, and Joe also held out his hand. The big and small palms clapped, then clenched into fists, and then hammered each other. Mr. Smith smiled. "It's a promise. I have never broken our promise. You should know, Joe." Joe nodded. Mr. Smith rubbed Joe's head. "Then you have to promise me that you will forget the story your grandmother told you. Believe me, this is just an old story your grandmother used to scare disobedient children. It is not true. In this world, there is no such thing as Mr. Death." Joe said, "But I saw it." "You were just dreaming." Mr. Smith could not help but smile. "Listen to me, your great-grandmother was a naughty person. I was also scared when I was young, but I later learned that it was all a lie." Joe thought for a moment and said, "Smith, did you see Mr. Death when you were young?" Mr. Smith had some experience in raising children. At this moment, he nodded seriously and said, "I saw it, but I knew it was just a dream. After I grew up, I never saw it again. Of course, if you become more obedient, Joe, you won't see it again." Joe nodded dubiously. Mr. Smith put him down from his lap and said casually, "Do you want another serving of grilled chicken meatballs?" Joe thought for a moment. In the end, he could not resist the problem of his stomach and nodded. At this moment, the door of the restaurant was pushed open by someone, and a young Oriental girl with dyed white hair walked in just like that. Her smile was very special, giving people the feeling that she was secretly revealing her little tale. She was like a wandering little monster who liked to play pranks on Halloween. Why did she dye it? Because Mr. Smith felt that there were few young people in the world who had such white hair. If she was an albino, at least the other body hair should be white. Of course, this wasn't anything out of the ordinary. In terms of individuality, there were many students in the school not far away who were extremely individualistic. What he was really curious about was the face of this Asian. There were not many Asians here. Mr. Smith basically had an impression of them, but the one in front of him looked very unfamiliar. Is she a freshman who just arrived? With such doubts in his heart, Mr. Smith walked out from the counter and came to the beautiful girl with short white hair. "Is there anything I can help you with?" The girl with short white hair. Nero looked around and naturally saw the little boy from the park who was sitting in the children's chair and poking his head out from the counter, Joe. Joe saw Nero's gaze at this moment and retracted his head at once. "Is there anything else to eat? I haven't had lunch yet." Nero lifted the shopping bag in her hand at this time. "I am a poor person who is being exploited by an unscrupulous boss." Mr. Smith found it interesting, so he smiled and said, "Then I recommend you try our celebrity package today. It will help you recover your strength." "Then let's have 4 portions first." Nero narrowed her eyes and smiled. Before Mr. Smith asked in surprise, she said directly, "I can finish it. Don't worry." Then, please wait a moment. Mr. Smith nodded, then asked the waiter who was cleaning up the table after old George finished his lunch to come over and greet this strange girl. She sat down at a table facing the counter. Joe at the counter quietly poked his head out again at this time. This time Nero did not look at him but just stared out of the window. Joe became bolder, and his neck gradually stretched out at this time. Unexpectedly, Nero suddenly turned back at this moment. Nero's neck suddenly stretched extremely long at this time, like the legendary long-necked monster. Her neck quickly circled a few times in the air and finally sent her head to Joe. She even turned into a ferocious grin with a green face. Joe couldn't help but be shocked. He fell directly from the children's chair and knocked over the unfinished mushroom soup, spilling it all over his body. Joe covered his mouth with his hands in horror as if he was frightened and couldn't speak. The waiter who was working heard the movement and quickly came over to pick Joe up. But Joe just pointed at the customer who had just arrived sitting by the window. The waiter looked over in confusion, but all he saw was Nero eating an appetizer salad. There was nothing special about her. The waiter shook his head and had to put down Joe, who was a little strange today. He then took off his coat and planned to go to the bathroom to wash it first. "Kid, sit here and don't go away, okay? I'll be right back." Joe grabbed the waiter's arm tightly, and he was so anxious that he seemed to be about to cry. "Let me take care of this child for you." Nero suddenly looked over at this time and smiled with a rather charming smile. "I like children very much." The waiter hesitated for a moment, but suddenly felt as if there was a voice in his mind urging him to agree. He nodded woodenly and then became silent. He silently picked up Joe and then came to Nero's side. Ignoring Joe's reaction, he sat him down next to Nero and then left with the swollen clothes expressionlessly. Joe was horrified to find that his hands and feet were tied to the chair by a black shadow. He couldn't move at all. At this moment, Nero suddenly picked up a fork and a table knife and began to rub them in front of Joe, making the wrong sound of "hua hua hua hua." "Oh, I haven't eaten children's meat for a long time. I'm so hungry." Nero's mouth cracked open all the way to her earlobes, revealing blood-red gums and sharp teeth that were like saw teeth. Are you Mr. Death?" Joe suddenly asked with a hint of sobbing. Nero, who was sharpening the knife, blinked when she heard the words. Then, she knocked the table with the handle of the knife in dissatisfaction. "Witch? I'm the witch who eats children. Haven't you heard of the story of the candy house?" Joe shook his head. "Boring." Nero suddenly yawned, threw the knife and fork on the table casually, and waved her hand with a look of disgust. Go play by yourself." In this way, the black shadow that imprisoned Joe's hands and feet suddenly disappeared. Perhaps one could never imagine the thinking of a 5-year-old child. At this moment, Joe was no longer afraid. He jumped down from the chair and ran around the table to Nero. He looked up at Nero curiously. "What are you looking at? I'm really going to eat you." Nero opened her mouth again. Joe blinked. Nero sneered. Her mouth turned into a big mouth and directly swallowed Joe whole. But after swallowing, she immediately spat him out. "See, like this, I'm going to eat you," Nero said while picking her ears. At this time, Joe suddenly reached out and pulled the corner of Nero's clothes. "Are you really not Mr. Death?" "No." Nero lowered her face and stared at the little boy. "I'm Sister Death, call me sister." "Well, what the hell is Mr. Death? Is there something wrong with this kid's head?" Chapter 1430. A stew was being prepared in the kitchen. Once the stew was done, the menu for the strange white-haired girl would be completed. Now, all they had to do was to control the heat. So, Mr. Smith let the apprentice do the work while he went to the back alley. After finishing his work, Mr. Smith planned to smoke a cigarette and rest. There were no particularly tall buildings in the town. The sky was not covered by the materials on the ground. Mr. Smith liked this place very much. He used to study in the university here, but he did not choose to leave after graduation. Most of his classmates were puzzled. After all, He graduated from the University of St. Andrews but ended up as a chef. Obviously, Mr. Smith was very angry with Mr. Smith's behavior, so in the past 10 years, the father and son rarely communicated. Even when Mr. Smith's wife, Deborah, was pregnant for the second time, only his mother, Mrs. Allura, was willing to come from her hometown. Although both his wife, Deborah, and his mother, Mrs. Allura, were trying to repair the relationship between Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith, there was not much progress so far. I really shouldn't let my relationship with Joe become like a father's. Mr. Smith now looked at the gradually dissipating smoke and thought slowly. Thinking about this, he took advantage of this gap to call home. It was his mother, Mrs. Allura, who answered the phone. After asking about his wife, Deborah, and learning that she was taking a nap, Mr. Smith suddenly said to his mother, Mrs. Allura, "Mum, can you not scare Joe with horror stories in the future?" I feel that the child took it seriously. Mrs. Allura on the other side of the phone was startled and asked curiously, "What happened?" Mr. Smith had to briefly explain Joe's situation. The child thinks that the Grim Reaper is really going to take him away, and he said that he can see the Grim Reaper. Mrs. Allura looked frightened and covered her mouth. "It's just a joke, just like the legend of the little devil at Halloween. He's just a child. I think I really have to reflect," Mrs. Allura said with annoyance. "When Joe comes back, I will apologize to him." Mr. Harding exchanged a few more words with Lady Allura and then turned off the telephone. At this time, the cigarette was finished. Mr. Smith extinguished the butt and couldn't help but shake his head. How could there be a Grim Reaper in this world? Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew through the alley, as if something was approaching from behind. Mr. Smith felt a sudden chill. He turned his head automatically, but he saw nothing, not that he saw nothing. Suddenly he saw a black cat. The black cat was lying on the steps of a staircase deep in the alley. It looked lazy. Its golden eyes were like amber. It was also looking at Mr. Smith. When he made eye contact with the black cat, Mr. Smith frowned slightly. He subconsciously moved closer to the black cat. The black cat remained motionless, as if it was not afraid of the stranger at all. Finally, Mr. Smith was about to reach the black cat. He was only 3 or 4 steps away from it. At this moment, the black cat suddenly stood up. After standing up, it did not move at all, only its tail gently swaying. Mr. Harding held out his hand towards it, as if he wished to touch it, as if under some impulse which he could not explain. "Excuse me," a voice, as calm as the sea breeze, sounded behind Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith was suddenly startled and hurriedly turned around. He saw a young man with a quiet aura. He also had an Asian face. Mr. Smith could not help but think of the white-haired girl who was full of personality in his restaurant. He wondered if the young man and her knew each other. Of course, this was just Mr. Smith's wild guess. "What's the matter?" Mr. Smith asked after calming down. The young man in front of him didn't look like a hooligan, and he didn't get too close either. It was just right. Almost in an instant, Mr. Smith felt that his defense had been inexplicably disintegrated. "I just came here and am not familiar with this place." The young man smiled and said, "Can you tell me how to get to the supermarket?" Mr. Smith nodded. "You go out from here first." Mr. Smith quickly pointed out the direction for the young man who asked for directions. He was very enthusiastic and told him the approximate location of some service shops. He knew that people who came here for the first time needed these little tips. "You are really a good man." The young man nodded slightly. "Thank you so much. If there is a chance, I will also come to your restaurant to taste." Of course, this was good. No chef did not like the idea of others eating their own dishes. "My name is Smith, the chef and the boss of this restaurant." Mr. Smith introduced himself very kindly. "Luaccio," the young man said casually, "I just came here and am preparing to enter the university." As expected, Mr. Smith nodded to himself, but he didn't directly say that he was once a student at the university and could be considered as Mr. Smith Sr. This was because Mr. Smith had interacted with some Asian students before, and they were more reserved. "Welcome to St. Andrews." Mr. Smith did what a local should do. "You will soon like it here." Boss Luo nodded with a smile, and slowly walked away under Mr. Smith's gaze. Mr. Smith shook his head casually. Every year, there would always be many new faces coming to this place, and there would also be familiar faces leaving here. He had been here for 10 years. Mr. Smith turned around. When he looked at the staircase again, the little black cat had disappeared without him noticing. Maybe it went to look for food. Mr. Smith thought that the stew was almost ready. Mr. Smith quickly returned to the kitchen from the back door. After a while, behind the outer wall corridor, a small figure slowly walked out. To Mr. Smith's surprise, when he took out the dishes, he was surprised to find that his son Joe was sitting at the table of the white-haired Asian girl. They seemed to be talking about something, and it seemed that they were even chatting well. Mr. Smith naturally knew his son's character. Although Joe was not introverted and shy, he was rarely so close to people he met for the first time. It was probably because girls had an affinity bonus, especially good-looking girls. "This child seems to have a bright future." As a father, Mr. Smith smiled and slowly came to Nero. "Miss, your food is ready." "Oh really? Another glass of beer, boss." "I want the biggest one," Nero said straightforwardly. "Eating fried chicken still needs to be accompanied by beer." "My son is bothering you, miss," Mr. Smith said. "And?" Nero stretched and said, "It's okay. This kid is quite interesting. I can't help but want to bully him when I look at him." She didn't know what Mr. Smith was thinking at the moment. Anyway, he walked away and went to find the cup. "Kid, where were you just now?" Seeing Mr. Smith walk away, Nero directly picked up a piece of chicken popcorn with her hand and stuffed it into her mouth. In the end, she licked the seasoning powder on her fingers. "Did you see death?" Joe just looked at the big sister sucking her fingers in front of him and asked puzzledly, "Aren't you Mr. Death?" "Sister." Nero narrowed her eyes and said, "If you really saw death, then that guy must be another one, not me." Joe lowered his head, thinking hard as if he wanted to understand this sentence. To some extent, the divine general who was once known as the tyrant of the Michael Club had little patience. At this time, Nero directly opened Joe's mouth with her finger. "You just need to tell me how you saw the Grim Reaper, what the Grim Reaper looks like, and where you saw it." Joe blinked and said, "Are you going to find Mr. Death?" Nero shrugged and said, "If I feel interesting, I should take a look." Joe asked curiously, "If you find Mr. Death, what if Mr. Death wants to take you away?" "It's not certain who will take who away." At this moment, Nero's nose suddenly became sharp. It really became sharp. Most of the changes of the Black Soul envoys were practiced by her in this way. Her second finger also reached into Joe's mouth and directly opened the little boy's mouth. "Don't talk nonsense, just say it." Joe had to shake his head. "I don't know. Sometimes Mr. Death is a sparrow, sometimes an owl standing on a tree, sometimes a little mouse standing straight outside the window." Nero suddenly asked curiously, "How can you be sure that these things are Mr. Death?" "I just know." Joe said quite seriously, "I know. It came to find me and wanted to take me away. But my grandma and dad didn't believe me. They said I was dreaming." "Oh." Nero nodded. "So when you saw me you thought I was also Mr. Death?" Joe nodded sadly. Nero suddenly said, "You do have a strange smell on you. Mr. Chef also has some." Joe didn't know what she was talking about, so he could only look at her in confusion. Nero's eyes turned at this moment. She suddenly narrowed her eyes and said, "Kid, I can help you beat Mr. Death away, but there is a condition." "What condition?" Joe almost didn't think too much. "I haven't thought about it yet." Nero narrowed her eyes. "But as long as you promise me, I will help you beat Mr. Death away. You can wait for me to think of any condition, then fulfill the promise." How about it? Isn't it cost-effective? Can you really beat Mr. Death away? Joe looked puzzled. Don't look at me like this, I'm very powerful. With that said, Nero suddenly reached out and grabbed Joe's back collar, lifted him up, then turned into a black wind and rushed out of the restaurant in an instant. This black wind used a hidden method. In a short moment, it circled most of the town and then returned to the restaurant again. The black wind gathered and turned into Nero again. She once again grabbed a fried chicken drumstick with her bare hands and gnawed. Joe's mouth opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed in, and his hair stood up like a broom. Miss, the beer you ordered. Mr. Smith just came back at this time. Joe, how did your hair become like this? Smith. Joe pointed at Nero blankly at this time and said, This sister is so powerful. Mr. Smith glanced at Nero in confusion. She drank the beer that she had just brought and burped in the end. Mr. Smith nodded, and she is quite powerful. Boss, another cup. Nero slammed the cup on the table and let out a satisfied exhale. Another plate of fried chicken. Okay. Mr. Smith nodded and glanced at Joe in confusion. He felt a little strange, but he still walked into the kitchen. Nero then looked at Joe and said casually, Now, do you believe that I can beat Mr. Death away? Joe nodded vigorously, then thought for a while and said, I promise you. What a good kid. Nero's eyes curved like crescent moons again, then she vaporized her body and turned into a silver-gray leopard. She then bit Joe's clothes and lifted him up. She jumped out of the restaurant from the window and onto the roof across the street. When Mr. Smith brought out the fried chicken, he found that the white-haired girl was gone, but there were a few bills on the table. This was enough to pay for all the expenses. Mr. Smith couldn't help but be stunned. He looked to the side and found that Joe was lying on the sofa and had fallen asleep. Mr. Smith shook his head, took a coat, and covered Joe with it. Then, he took back the small blackboard outside the restaurant and hung the resting sign. Mr. Smith was also a little sleepy and planned to take a break. He sat at the counter and dozed off, but he didn't know that there was a pair of amber eyes looking at everything in the restaurant outside the window. Then, a black kitten jumped away. This kitten's movements were unusually agile. In the blink of an eye, it crossed 2 streets and finally got into a house from a garage. The house was almost opaque, and all the curtains were drawn close. The black cat jumped on the table in the living room, then used the table as a stepping board to jump to a chair in front of the fireplace, jumping into someone's arms. The guy sitting on the chair reached out and gently stroked the back of the black cat, then asked in a low voice, What makes you feel scared, little guy? Chapter 1431. The silver-gray leopard came on the cloud, stepped down, and finally landed in the yard. This was Mr. Smith's home. Because of the remote location of the town, the houses of ordinary people could be separated by a long distance. After landing, Nero loosened her mouth and threw Joe directly to the ground. Of course, she was not gentle, so Joe fell directly and, unfortunately, hurt a little. He got up from the ground, rubbed his aching buttocks, and spat out the grass clippings that he inhaled. Nero turned into a black mist at this time, and then returned to her original appearance. Nero was still holding a beer in her hand. At this time, she opened the bottle cap with her teeth and drank. Apparently, when she left Mr. Smith's restaurant, she took something out. Oh, the environment here looks good. Nero looked into the distance and commented, If something happens, it's not easy to be discovered. Joe asked curiously, What happened? Nero narrowed her eyes and smiled. For example, the house is on fire. For example, a robber suddenly broke in and killed everyone in the house. For example, a crocodile that has been hungry for 10 days crawled in. Big sister, you are so funny. Joe looked at her innocently. The child obviously did not know fear. Nero squatted down, stretched out her hands, and pinched one side of Joe's cheeks, pulling them slightly. The collagen on the child's face was invincible. When she let go of her hands, the face that was pulled apart would return to its original appearance in an instant. Nero couldn't stop. She pulled repeatedly several times. After Joe's eyes were slightly red, she said, "Well, call out the Mr. Death you mentioned." Joe shook his head and said, "I can't see Mr. Death now." "So you are teasing me, right?" Nero narrowed her eyes. "This time, it will really eat you. Eat it in your mouth and bite it open. Then, your blood and brain matter will explode like a balloon filled with water. Then, your body fluid will be all over the place." Perhaps it was because the description was too detailed that Joe could easily imagine it. His face turned pale, and he ran back into the house in fright. Nero didn't catch him at this time. She didn't even seem to have the intention to move. She just watched Joe run back into the house. The door closed and Joe poked his head out of the window, but he found that he couldn't see this strange and powerful big sister anymore. He couldn't help but feel strange. After observing for a while, he tentatively opened the back door of the house bit by bit, trying to see more of the courtyard, but he still didn't find anything. At this moment, a terrifying head with a long neck fell down from the door frame. Joe was really frightened this time and fell to the ground. A black whirlwind blew into the room and turned into a human form again. It was Nero who had just disappeared. Joe hurriedly got up from the ground. He was like a curious kitten, facing an unknown object, hesitating whether to approach it or not. He just stood there in a daze. Nero didn't care about Joe's appearance at all. She casually flipped through the things in the living room. Who's there?" At this moment, there were footsteps and a questioning voice upstairs. It was Mrs. Allura's voice. Mrs. Allura's figure soon appeared at the stairs. The first thing she saw was Joe, so she hurried down the stairs. Joe suddenly became flustered and subconsciously looked at Nero, but at this time, he once again lost sight of this eccentric big sister. "Joe, when did you come back? Where's Smith?" Mrs. Allura came to Joe. Seeing that he was a little sloppy, she couldn't help but reach out to pat him. But at this moment, Mrs. Allura saw her 5-year-old grandson looking at her in surprise, which made Mrs. Allura feel very puzzled. It turned out that Nero, who had suddenly disappeared, had appeared behind Lady Allura. Her hands even transformed into a pair of elephant ears and quietly hung behind Lady Allura's ears. Such a prank made Joe laugh at once, but this made Mrs. Allura even more puzzled. She frowned and said, "Joe, be quiet. Your mother is sleeping. She needs more rest. Don't wake her up. I'm going back to my room." Joe lowered his head and quickly said a few words before running away from Lady Allura and running back to his room. Mrs. Allura opened her mouth. She had promised Mr. Smith to apologize to Joe, but she couldn't say it. She couldn't help shaking her head. Mrs. Allura quickly went to the kitchen. She needed to prepare some afternoon tea for the pregnant Deborah. But Lady Allura suddenly pinched her neck. She had been feeling very tired recently, and she thought it was because she had to take care of Deborah. But for some reason, she suddenly felt her body relax, and she seemed to feel much more comfortable. She didn't know why, but her mood suddenly improved. A black mist slowly sank from behind Mrs. Allura. After landing, the black mist began to grow taller. Nero appeared again. But this time, there was something else in her palm. It was a furry spider about the size of a ping-pong ball, exuding some gray smoke. The spider faced Nero at this time, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Nero blinked her eyes, and her 5 fingers suddenly contracted. She clenched the spider directly into her fist and squeezed it into a ball. Next, she threw the ball in her fist directly into her mouth and swallowed the crushed spider into her stomach. Nero touched her stomach, then stuck out her tongue and made a retching look. "It tastes terrible." She turned around and walked to Joe's room. Without knocking on the door, she went through the door and saw Joe sitting at the table, writing something. Nero quietly came behind Joe with her hands behind her back. She seemed to want to scare the child again. But she saw Joe writing something on a small note at this time. "I don't want to die." She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why are you writing this?" Joe was not frightened this time. After writing this note, he began to write another note. Tell God. Nero blinked. Do you know where God is? In the sky. Joe said slowly. Mom said that heaven is in the sky, and God lives in heaven, so he is in the sky. Nero thought for a while and said, So you tie the note to the balloon and let the balloon help you take the note to the sky and let God know. Joe nodded. Nero sat directly on the table and picked up a note written by Joe. Did God respond to you? Joe shook his head and looked at Nero. He may not have received the letter I wrote to him. Mr. Balloon may have been blown to other places by the wind before reaching heaven, so I have to write a few more letters. There must be a letter that can be sent to heaven, right? Nero suddenly muttered to herself, staring at the little boy without blinking. She got an affirmation and a look without any doubt. After a while, Nero tore the note in her hand in front of Joe expressionlessly. Joe was so puzzled that he could only open his mouth. Nero said indifferently, Even if you put all the balloons in the world in the sky, God will not receive your letter. Joe just looked like this and suddenly cried. This little boy was interesting when he cried. His eyes were red, tears were rolling in his eyes, and then he sniffled from time to time. He began to write notes again, one after another. Nero obviously had no intention of coaxing at all, as if making the little boy cry was a great achievement. She opened the drawer of the table, took out a bottle of chocolate beans, and began to eat. She might be a rat, and rats always hid in dark corners and had an unimaginable foraging ability. They even ate anything as long as they could survive. This is mine. Joe finally couldn't bear it and protested while crying. Hit me, Nero said with a grin on her face. Joe gritted his teeth, stood up at once, and stared hatefully at this big sister who was so bad, but his eyes soon became frightened. Nero, who still had a smile on her face, seemed to have noticed something. She instantly looked back. The moment she looked back, her eyes were no longer teasing like when she bullied the little guy. Instead, they were like a killing machine. There was nothing outside the window, but a small sparrow was standing on the branch outside the window. The sparrow just stared at the room. Oh, it seems that it can't help but want to attack. Nero sneered and jumped down from the table. She turned her palm, poured out a few chocolate beans, and stuffed them into Joe's mouth. Kid, don't eat them all, leave some for me. Before Joe could react, she turned into a black fog, flew out from the gap of the window, and headed toward the little sparrow. At the same time, the sparrow seemed to feel the danger, and flew out from the branch with a shake of its wings. In the air, the black fog turned into a silver-gray leopard, and directly chased after the sparrow. The leopard didn't rush to catch the sparrow, but just followed it unhurriedly until the sparrow flew a few miles away, flying into an idle warehouse on the ground. The warehouse was dark, and the windows that allowed light to pass through were covered with curtains. Some places were even sealed with nails and wooden plank. When Nero, who turned into a silver-gray leopard, walked into the warehouse, she saw the little sparrow standing on the head of an old tractor. The sparrow suddenly made a sound. It was a low human voice. Are you a druid? If you think so, then so be it. Nero, who turned into a silver-gray leopard, said casually, You can treat me as a druid passing by and acting for justice, Mr. Death. It doesn't matter. The sparrow didn't speak this time, but shook its head from side to side, as if to better look at the silver-gray leopard in front of it. After a while, it spoke again. If there's nothing special, I hope you won't get close to the smiths again. Are they your things? Nero asked curiously. I'm just carrying out my job. Sparrow at this time said indifferently. I don't like to have too many conflicts. I also know several elders among the druids, so I don't want to be on bad terms with you. Nero chuckled at this time. I forgot to tell you, in addition to being a righteous person, I'm also an evil person, Mr. Death. Besides, I'm very interested in this little demon. Before I get tired of playing with it, no one else can touch my prey. Then there's no other way. Sparrow shook its head at this time. It looks like I can only beat you back. Sorry. After that, the sparrow flew up fiercely. At the same time, its body even began to grow. In an instant, the small sparrow turned into a giant eagle with a wingspan of 3 meters. The sharp claws grabbed directly at Nero, who transformed into a silver-gray leopard at this time. The sharp eagle beak was like steel, even glowing with a cold light. This pounce wasn't very sudden, but its speed was extremely fast. However, it couldn't do anything to this leopard whose thoughts no one could guess. Nero said while fighting with the giant eagle easily, "Mr. Death, it seems that you're more like a druid. This transformation skill is still very good." In the form of a giant eagle, it clearly didn't expect this giant leopard to be more difficult to deal with than it had imagined. It couldn't help but increase its strength, but it still couldn't do anything. In fact, in a situation where it couldn't react in time, the giant eagle was suddenly pounced onto the ground by the leopard. At this time, Nero, who transformed into a leopard, pressed the giant eagle's wings and legs with her 4 limbs. Then she lowered her head and blew hot air at the back of the giant eagle's neck. "Mr. Death, do you like it more intense or more gentle?" Before it could respond, or even before it spoke, Nero directly stretched out her claws at this time and tore a terrible wound on the back of the giant eagle without saying anything. A shrill scream sounded, and the giant eagle's body began to twitch violently. Nero lifted her claws and gently licked the blood on them. She had been a black soul for some time, but not long, but she was trained to be the divine general of the Michael Club since she was a child. "Tyrant! Nero,